But for reading tonight, tonight is Monday. It is the evening, and we are continuing The Jewel of Seven Stars by Bram Stoker. We got the first three chapters started last Monday after we completed Camille. It should be Camellia because I said so. Midstream. So we got a little bit started ahead of time. I technically don't have a second book prepared, but we have this book's larger than the previous one, so we should be fine with that. My mouth, my lips, they were not moving. There. Now I'm going to speak with my lips closed, and it still sounds like looks like I'm saying things. When we ended last time, The Jewel of the Seven Stars, we discovered that some old guy, dad, had a fall, and he didn't have his life alert with him. So he is kind of in a bad way. He's passed out. The doctor doesn't know why he's not awakened, but he has mysterious instructions to that his body must remain within the room. There were things and stuff about the place. They weren't to be touched or moved or fiddled with. They are all of some enigmatic purpose. And at all times, both a boy and a girl were to keep watch over him in this room until something happens. I presume. Our cast includes a girl, the daughter, who summoned the police and the fire, the police and the doctors when she found her dad passed out and bleeding all over the place. And she also summoned a lawyer whom she had met once or twice because reasons, I guess, the power of the narrative plot line. And so he showed up, and his whole brain is like, I know she's going through a bad time, but God, I'm horny. I think we started off with he was having a dream. At the very beginning, they were on a boat in a lake, and it was him and it was the girl in question, and he was having disturbing thoughts, but even more disturbing joys. Disturbing joys. Don't know what those are. Nope. Gotta keep this YouTube appropriate. But at the very end of chapter 3, we were finding it difficult to stay awake in the room. A fellow, he purchased a respirator. He's hiding it from the other for some reason. I don't know. Maybe he's weak. And the wisdom of his manhood. That's right. Disturbing joys of the wisdom of his manhood. And he was awakened by several gunshots. There was the police officer, the detective, or the copper. He was in there. He was very important manhood wisdom. Yes, right. He had his guns ready. He was very suspicious. He was investigating the foul play, and I'm pretty sure the story is alluding to he suspected the daughter, which, if you think about it, makes sense. Closed room doors, windows, yada yada yada. She's the only one there, and he's in a bad way. She's literally the only one who could have done anything. So, yeah, don't compliment him about the wisdom. He may get a big head. Don't make his wisdom swell. Yes, it's dangerous. Wisdom leads to babies. Not wise. Very a bit of a catch-22. The more wise you get, the more fatherly you become. And I don't mean vibe wise. It's a dangerous world out there. Anyways, yes, at the end of chapter 3. This is gunfire. That's someone else's stream. There we go. Bookwise. Yes, there was a shriek. Oh, yes. And the last paragraph. I'll just read this before we move on. All at once, my senses were full awake. A shriek rang in my ears. The room was filled suddenly with a blaze of light. There was the sound of pistol shots, 1, 2, and a haze of white smoke in the room. When my waking eyes regained their power, I could have shrieked with horror myself at what I saw before me. And that's where we ended. I just wanted to recapture that cliffhanger moment. Before we begin, Chapter 4, The Second Attempt. The sight which met my eyes had the horror of a dream within a dream, with the certainty of reality added. The room was as I had seen it last, except that the shadowy look had gone in the glare of the many lights, and every article in it stood stark and solidly real. By the empty bed sat Nurse Kennedy, as my eyes had last seen her, sitting bolt upright in the armchair beside the bed. She must have good core muscles. She's been like that a lot. She had placed a pillow behind her so that her back might be erect, but her neck was fixed as that of one in a cataleptic trance. She was, to all intents and purposes, turned into stone. There was no special expression on her face, no fear, no horror, nothing such as might be expected of one in such a condition. Her open eyes showed neither wonder nor interest. She was simply a negative existence, warm, breathing, placid, but absolutely unconscious of the world around her. The bedclothes were disarranged, as though the patient had been drawn from under them without throwing them back. The corner of the upper sheet hung upon the floor. Close by it lay one of the bandages with which the doctor had dressed the wounded wrist. Another and another lay further along the floor, as though forming a clue to where the sick man now lay. This was almost exactly where he had been found on the previous night, under the great safe. Again, the left arm lay toward the safe, but there had been a new outrage. An attempt had been made to sever the arm close to the bangle which held the tiny key. A heavy kukri knife, one of the leaf-shaped knives which the Gurkhas and others of the hill tribes of India use with such effect, had been taken from its place on the wall, and with it the attempt had been made. It was manifest that just at that moment of striking, the blow had been arrested, for only the point of the knife and not the edge of the blade had struck the flesh. As it was, on the outer side of the arm had been cut to the bone, and the blood was pouring out. In addition, the former wound in front of the arm had been cut or torn about terribly. One of the cuts seemed to jet out blood as if with each pulsation of the heart. By the side of her father knelt Miss Trelawney. Yes, her white nightdress stained with the blood in which she knelt. Well, that would stand out quite a bit, wouldn't it? In the middle of the room, Sergeant Daw, in his shirt and trousers and stocking feet, was putting fresh cartridges into his revolver in a dazed, mechanical kind of way. His eyes were red and heavy, and he seemed only half awake and less than half conscious of what was going on around him. Several servants, bearing lights of various kinds, were clustered round the doorway. As I rose from my chair and came forward, Miss Trelawney raised her eyes toward me. When she saw me, she shrieked and started to her feet, pointing towards me. Never shall I forget the strange picture she made, with her white drapery all smeared with blood, which, as she rose from the pool, ran in streaks toward her bare feet. I believe that I had only been asleep, that whatever influence had worked on Miss Trelawney and Nurse Kennedy, and in less degree on Sergeant Daw, had not touched me. The respirator had been of some service, though it had not kept off the tragedy whose dire evidences were before me. I can understand now. I could understand even then. The fright added to that which had gone before, which my appearance must have evoked. It's because you kept it a secret. I still had on the respirator, which covered mouth and nose. My hair had been tossed in my sleep, coming suddenly forward. Thus enwrapped and disheveled in that horrified crowd, I must have had, in the strange mixture of lights, an extraordinary and terrifying appearance. It was a lot of words for, oops, I left my mask on and I looked weird. It was well that I recognized all this in time to avert another catastrophe, for the half-dazed, mechanically acting detective put in the cartridges and had raised his revolver to shoot at me when I succeeded in wrenching off the respirator and shouting to him to hold his hand. In this also, he acted mechanically. The red, half-awake eyes had not in them even then the intention of conscious action. He was acting on instinct, I guess. The danger, however, was averted. The relief of the situation, strangely enough, came in a simple fashion. Mrs. Grant, seeing that her young mistress had on only her nightdress, had gone to fetch a dressing gown, which she now threw over her. This simple act brought us all back to the region of fact. With a long breath, so here's the thing, in my brain, like, you see these movies of older times, this kind of era, and the girls, they wear these night dresses, and frankly, they're huge ass dresses. Hello, Moya. Welcome in, friend. They wear these huge ass nightgowns, and then, like, oh no, that's immodest, but they go get a house coat, which is like this like millimeter thick covering for all this massive amount of cloth you're already wearing. Oh, now you're dignified. I don't understand that. It just baffles me. It makes me good. It drives me crazy. You've heard worse long-winded descriptions in YA novels for the love interest's eyes. Yeah. Clue 3 grim. Grim. With a long breath, one and all seemed to devote themselves to the most pressing matter before us, that of staunching the flow of blood from the arm of the wounded man. Even as the thought of action came, I rejoiced, for the bleeding was very proof that Mr. Trelawney still lived. Yeah, for now, it's like he's being a freaking gusher of blood at the moment while you're taking off your damn mask. Oh, okay. And now you can say they learned it from Stoker, yeah. Yeah, we'll stand up and stretch. I saw it. I was actually just taking a free hydrate. All right. There's a lot of stretching today. I noticed there's okay. Well, we cracked a shoulder at the very least, so I hope you're happy with yourself. Twisting. Okay. Adjust myself. There we go. Last night's lesson was not thrown away. More than one of those present, knew now what to do in such an emergency, and within a few seconds, willing hands were at work on a tourniquet. A man was at once dispatched for the doctor, and several of the servants disappeared to make themselves respectable. The important details being covered, area. We lifted Mr. Trelawney onto the sofa where he had lain yesterday. He clearly doesn't want to be there, and having done what we could for him, turned our attention to the nurse. In all the turmoil, she had not stirred. She sat there as before, erect and rigid, breathing softly and naturally and with a placid smile. As it was manifestly of no use to attempt anything with her till the doctor had come, we began to think of the general situation. There's clearly something wrong with her. Go like pat her on the shoulder or something. Smack her in the face. Mrs. Grant had by this time taken her mistress away and changed her clothes, for she was back presently in a dressing gown and slippers, and with the traces of blood removed from her hands. She was now much calmer, though she trembled sadly, and her face was ghastly white. If she is erect and rigid for more than 4 hours, they are calling the doctor, friend. It's okay, just relax. It's all right. They're doing the right thing. When she had looked at her father's wrist, I holding the tourniquet, she turned her eyes round the room, resting them now and again on each one of us present in turn, but seeming to find no comfort. It was so apparent to me that she did not know where to begin or whom to trust that, to reassure her, I said, "I am all right now. I was only asleep." Her voice had a gulp in it as she said in a low voice, "Asleep. You. And my father in danger. I thought you were on the watch." I felt the sting of justice in the reproach, but I really wanted to help her, so I answered, "Only asleep. It is bad enough, I know, but there is something more than an only around us here. Had it not been that I took a definite precaution, I might have been like the nurse there." She turned her eyes swiftly on the weird figure, sitting grimly upright like a painted statue, and then her face softened. With the action of habitual courtesy, she said, "Yeah, but you were facing away to hide the mask. Look, say, hey guys, yo, I got a mask. I'm trying out a thing. Don't mind me." "Then keep watch?" Do you know what the word watch means? It means not pointing your eyes 180 degrees away from the thing you are trying to watch. So yes, everything is his fault, and so saith I. Right, sorry, she was about to say something. "Forgive me. I did not mean to be rude. But I am in such distress and fear that I hardly know what I am saying. Oh, it is dreadful. I fear for fresh trouble and horror and mystery every moment." This cut me to the very heart, and out of the heart's fullness I spoke. "Don't give me a thought. I don't deserve it. I was on guard, and yet I slept. All that I can say is that I didn't mean to, and I tried to avoid it, but it was over me before I knew it. Anyhow, it is done now, and can't be undone. Probably someday we may understand it all, but now let us try to get at some idea of what has happened. Tell me what you remember." The effort to recollect seemed to stimulate her. She became calmer as she spoke. Just a hysterical woman. I mean, she's hysterical, the nurse is catatonic, it averages out. "I was asleep and woke suddenly with the same horrible feeling on me that father was in great and immediate danger. I jumped up and ran just as I was into his room. It was nearly pitch dark. I don't know why there should be lights here. But as I opened the door, there was light enough to see father's nightdress as he lay on the floor under the safe, just as on that first awful night. Then I think I must have gone mad for a moment." She stopped and shuddered. My eyes lit on Sergeant Daw, still fiddling in an aimless way with the revolver. Mindful of my work with my tourniquet, I said calmly, "Now tell us, Sergeant Daw, what did you fire at?" The policeman seemed to pull himself together with the habit of obedience. Looking around at the servants remaining in the room, he said with that air of importance which, I take it, is the regulation attitude of an official of the law before strangers, "Don't you think, sir, that we can allow the servants to go away? We can then better go into the matter." I nodded approval. The servants took the hint and withdrew, though unwillingly, the last one closing the door behind him, and totally not listening at the other side of the keyhole. Then the detective went on. "I think I had better tell you my impressions, sir, rather than recount my actions. Typical law enforcement. That is, so far as I remember them." There was a mortified deference now in his manner, which probably arose from his consciousness of the awkward position in which he found himself. I went to sleep half-dressed, as I am now, with the revolver under my pillow. It was the last thing I remember thinking of. I do not know how long I slept. I had turned off the electric light, and it was quite dark. I thought I heard a scream, but I can't be sure, for I felt thick-headed as a man does when he is called too soon after an extra long stretch of work. Not that such was the case this time. Anyhow, my thoughts flew to the pistol. I took it out and ran on to the landing. Then I heard a sort of scream, or rather a call for help, and ran into this room. The room was dark, for the lamp beside the nurse was out, and the only light was that from the landing, coming through the open door. Miss Trelawney was kneeling on the floor beside her father and was screaming. I thought I saw something move between me and the window, so, without thinking, and being half dazed and only half awake, I shot at it. This is why guns in houses are not a good idea. It moved a little more to the right between the windows, and I shot again. Then you came up out of the big chair with all that muffling on your face. It seemed to me, being, as I say, half dazed and half awake, I know, sir, you will take this into account, as if it had been you, being in the same direction as the thing I had fired at. And so I was about to fire again when you pulled off the wrap. Here, I asked him. I was cross-examining now and felt at home. You say you thought I was the thing you fired at. What thing? The man scratched his head, but made no reply. Come, sir, I said. What thing? What was it like? The answer came in a low voice. I don't know, sir. I thought there was something, but what it was or what it was like, I haven't the faintest notion. So I shot first and I thought I'd ask questions later. I suppose it was because I had been thinking of the pistol before I went to sleep, and because when I came in here, I was half dazed and only half awake, which I hope you will in future, sir, always remember. He clung to that formula of excuse as though it were his sheet anchor. I did not want to antagonize the man. On the contrary, I wanted to have him with us. Besides, I had on me, at that time, myself, the shadow of my own default. So I said as kindly as I knew how, Quite right, Sergeant. Your impulse was correct, though, of course, in the somnolent condition in which you were, and perhaps partly affected by the same influence, whatever it may be, which made me sleep, and which has put the nurse in this cataleptic trance, it could not be expected that you would pause to weigh matters. But now, whilst the matter is fresh, let me see exactly where you stood, and where I sat. We shall be able to trace the course of your bullets. The prospect of action and the exercise of his habitual skill seemed to brace him at once. He seemed a different man as he set about his work. I asked Mrs. Grant to hold the tourniquet, and went and stood where he had stood, and looked where, in the darkness, he had pointed. I could not but notice the mechanical exactness of his mind, as when he showed me where he had stood, and drew, as a matter of course, the revolver from his pistol pocket, and pointed with it. The chair from which I had risen still stood in its place. Then I asked him to point with his hand only, as I wished to move in the track of his shot. Just behind my chair, and a little back of it, stood a high buhl cabinet. The glass door was shattered. I asked, Was this the direction of your first shot or your second? The answer came promptly. The second. The first was over there. He turned a little to the left, and toward the wall where the great safe stood, and pointed. I followed the direction of his hand, and came to the low table whereon rested, amongst other curios, the mummy of the cat which had raised Silvio's ire. I got a candle and easily found the mark of the bullet. It had broken a little glass vase and a taza of black basalt, exquisitely engraved with hieroglyphics, the graven lines being filled with some faint green cement, and the whole thing being polished to an equal surface. The bullet, flattened against the wall, lay on the table. It's a hollow point. I then went to the broken cabinet. It was evidently a receptacle for valuable curios, for in it were some great scarabs of gold, agate, green jasper, amethyst, lapis lazuli, opal, granite, and blue-green china. None of these things, happily, were touched. The bullet had gone through the back of the cabinet, but no other damage, save the shattering of the glass, had been done. I could not but notice the strange arrangement of the curios on the shelf of the cabinet. All the scarabs, rings, amulets, etc., were arranged in an uneven oval around an exquisitely carved golden miniature figure of a hawk-headed god crowned with a disc and plumes. I did not wait to look further at present, for my attention was demanded by more pressing things. But I determined to make a more minute examination when I should have time. Hopefully they won't be moved. It was evident that some of the strange Egyptian smell clung to these old curios. Through the broken glass came an added whiff of spice and gum and bitumen, almost stronger than those I had already noticed as coming from others in the room. All this had really taken but a few minutes. I was surprised when my eye met, through the chinks between the dark window blinds and the window cases, the brighter light of the coming dawn. When I went back to the sofa and took the tourniquet from Mrs. Grant, she went over and pulled up the blinds. Because, I guess she has to be the one to do that. It's like a rule or something. Wouldn't be moral. It would be hard to imagine anything more ghastly than the appearance of the room with the faint grey light of early morning coming in upon it. As the windows faced north, any light that came was a fixed grey light without any of the rosy possibility of dawn which comes in the eastern quarter of heaven. The electric lights seemed dull and yet glaring, and every shadow was of a hard intensity. There was nothing of morning freshness, nothing of the softness of night. All was hard and cold and inexpressibly dreary. The face of the senseless man on the sofa seemed of a ghastly yellow, and the nurse's face had taken a suggestion of green from the shade of the lamp near her. Only Miss Trelawney's face looked white, and it was of a pallor which made my heart ache. It looked as if nothing on God's earth could ever again bring back to it the color of life and happiness. It was a relief to us all when Dr. Winchester came in, breathless with running. He only asked one question. "Can anyone tell me anything of how this wound was gotten?" On seeing the head shake which went round us under his glance, he said no more, but applied himself to his surgical work. For an instant he looked up at the nurse, still sitting so still, but then bent himself to his task, a grave frown contracting his brows. It was not till the arteries were tied and the wounds completely dressed that he spoke again, except, of course, when he had asked for anything to be handed to him or to be done for him. When Mr. Trelawney's wounds had been thoroughly cared for, he said to Miss Trelawney, "What's these? I got tea and kohi, like coffee." I have to mouse over the emotes. I can't see them. They're too damn tiny. "What about Nurse Kennedy?" She answered at once. "I really do not know. I found her when I came into the room at 2:30, sitting exactly as she does now. We have not moved her or changed her position. She has not wakened even since Dawes' pistol shots did not disturb her." "Pistol shots? Have you then discovered any cause for this new outrage?" The rest were silent, and so I answered, "We have discovered nothing. I was in the room watching the nurse. Earlier in the evening, I fancied that the mummy smells were making me drowsy, so I went out and got a respirator. I had it on when I came on duty, but it did not keep me from going to sleep. I awoke to see the room full of people, that is, Miss Trelawney and Sergeant Daw, being only half awake and still stupefied by the same scent or influence which had affected us. Fancy that he saw something moving through the shadowy darkness of the room and fired twice. When I rose out of my chair with my face swathed in the respirator, he took me for the cause of the trouble. Naturally enough, he was about to fire again when I was fortunately in time to manifest my identity. Take off my mask. You could just say take off your damn mask. Mr. Trelawney was lying beside the safe just as he was found last night and was bleeding profusely from the new wound in his wrist. We lifted him on the sofa and made a tourniquet. That is literally and absolutely all that any of us know as yet. We have not touched the knife, which you see lies close by the pool of blood. Look, I said, going over and lifting it. The point is red with the blood which has dried. Dr. Winchester stood quite still for a few minutes before speaking. Then the doings of this night are quite as mysterious as those of last night. Quite, I answered. He said nothing in reply, but turning to Miss Trelawney said, We had better take Nurse Kennedy into another room. I suppose there is nothing to prevent it. Nothing. Please, Mrs. Grant, see that Nurse Kennedy's room is ready and ask 2 of the men to come and carry her in. Mrs. Grant went out immediately and in a few minutes came back saying, The room is quite ready and the men are here. By her direction, 2 footmen came into the room and, lifting up the rigid body of Nurse Kennedy, under the supervision of the doctor, carried her out of the room. Miss Trelawney remained with me in the sick chamber, and Mrs. Grant went with the doctor into the nurse's room. So Kennedy is suffering rigor mortis, I guess? When we were alone, Miss Trelawney came over to me and, taking both my hands in hers, said, I hope you won't remember what I said. I did not mean it. I own I was distraught. I did not make reply, but I held her hands and kissed them. There are different ways of kissing a lady's hands. This way was intended as homage and respect, and it was accepted as such in the high-bred, dignified way which marked Miss Trelawney's bearing in every movement. God, here we go. I went over to the sofa and looked down at the senseless man. The dawn had come much nearer in the last few minutes, and there was something of the clearness of day in the light. As I looked at the stern, cold, set face, now as white as a marble monument in the pale grey light, I could not but feel that there was some deep mystery beyond all that had happened within the last 26 hours. Those beetling brows screened some massive purpose. That high, broad forehead held some finished train of reasoning, which the broad chin and massive jaw would help to carry into effect. As I looked and wondered, there began to steal over me again that phase of wandering thought which had last night heralded the approach of sleep. I resisted it, and held myself sternly to the present. This was easier to do when Miss Trelawney came close to me, and, leaning her forehead against my shoulder, began to cry silently. Poor hysterical woman. Such womanly women. Tisk tisk. Then all the manhood in me woke, and to present purpose. It was of little use trying to speak. Words were inadequate to thought. Bro, her dad's right there, but we understood each other. She did not draw away when I put arm protectingly over her shoulder. That's the word. I put arm go round woman. Yeah, sorry. Cough, cough. When I put arm protectingly over her shoulder, as I used to do with my little sister long ago, when in her childish trouble she would come to her big brother to be comforted. Yeah, oh bro, yeah. Dad's right there, and he's dying. That very act or attitude of protection made me more resolute in my purpose, and seemed to clear my brain of idle, dreamy wandering in thought. With an instinct of greater protection, however, I took away my arm as I heard the doctor's footstep outside the door. Oh, can't get caught protecting the lady folk. Her dad's right here, obviously. When Dr. Winchester came in, he looked intently at the patient before speaking. His brows were set, and his mouth was a thin, hard line. Presently, he said, There is much in common between the sleep of your father and Nurse Kennedy. Whatever influence has brought it about has probably worked the same way in both cases. In Kennedy's case, the coma is less marked. I cannot feel, however, that with her we may be able to do more and more quickly than with this patient, as our hands are not tied. I have placed her in a draught, and already she shows some signs, though very faint ones, of ordinary unconsciousness. The rigidity of her limbs is less, and her skin seems more sensitive, or perhaps I should say less insensitive to pain. Awesome. You're torturing her to see if she's okay. I love this era. Hello, Queen. I hydrate. And swallow. I'm actually going through this fluid a lot faster than normal. I'm sneaking my own little hydrates. A pin test. Yes, hospitals are about pain. That's why they don't. That's how they keep you away from them. But interesting that she's like got like stiffness in the limbs, the rigidity of her limbs, but Mr. Trelawney, Dad, he doesn't seem to have that. He seems quite frickin' mobile for someone who's catatonic. How is it then, I asked, that Mr. Trelawney is still in this state of insensibility, and yet, so far as we know, his body has not had such rigidity at all? What do you mean, so far as you know? Like, you just know. That I cannot answer. The problem is one which we may solve in a few hours, or it may need a few days. But it will be a useful lesson and diagnosis to us all, and perhaps to many and many others after us, who knows? He added, with the genuine fire of an enthusiast. Oh, rar, you're streaming. Go stream. Thank you for the lurk. As the morning wore on, he flitted perpetually between the two rooms, watching anxiously over both patients. He made Mrs. Grant remain with the nurse, but either Miss Trelawney or I, generally both of us, remained with the wounded man. We each managed, however, to get bathed and dressed. The doctor and Mrs. Grant remained with Mr. Trelawney whilst we had breakfast. Just eat in the room. Okay, guys, come on. Sergeant Daw went off to report at Scotland Yard the progress of the night, and then to the local station to arrange for the coming of his comrade, Wright, as fixed with Superintendent Dolan. When he returned, I could not but think that he had been hauled over the coals for shooting in a sick room, or perhaps for shooting at all without certain and proper cause. His remark to me enlightened me in the matter. A good character is worth something, sir, in spite of what some of them say. See, I've still got leave to carry my revolver. Yeah. Maybe you shouldn't. That day was a long and anxious one. Toward nightfall, Nurse Kennedy so far improved that the rigidity in her limbs entirely disappeared. She still breathed quietly and regularly, but the fixed expression on her face, though it was a calm enough expression, gave place to fallen eyelids and the negative look of sleep. Dr. Winchester had, towards evening, brought 2 more nurses, one of whom was to remain with Nurse Kennedy, and the other to share in the watching with Miss Trelawney, because we need another nurse to get stiff, who had insisted on remaining up herself. She had, in order to prepare for the duty, slept for several hours in the afternoon. We had all taken counsel together and had arranged thus for the watching in Mr. Trelawney's room. Mrs. Grant was to remain beside the patient till 12, when Miss Trelawney would relieve her. The new nurse was to sit in Miss Trelawney's room and to visit the sick chamber each quarter of an hour. The doctor would remain till 12, when I was to relieve him. One or other of the detectives was to remain within hail of the room all night, and to pay periodical visits to see that all was well. Thus the watchers would be watched, and the possibility of such events as last night, when the watchers were both overcome, would be avoided. It's a good plan. It seems like a solid plan. When the sun set, a strange and grave anxiety fell on all of us, and our separate ways we prepared for the vigil. Dr. Winchester had evidently been thinking of my respirator, for he told me he would go out and get one. Indeed, he took to the idea so kindly that I persuaded Miss Trelawney to also have one which she could put on when her time for watching came. And so the night drew on. We do have ads starting. Oh, we can even see the temporary banner. So we're going to pause here right between chapters, which is very convenient. We'll be back in a few minutes. Get up, stretch, refill your bladders. Okay, we are back. And I pull up my socks. What is this? Violin. Yeah. We have violin. String instruments. Am I doing... Oh, my camera's doing the same nonsense again. No, the camera hub is fine. Oh, here we go. Very strange. I just need a new computer. More of a cello, but that is so it's a string instrument, and that is the limit of my understanding. I do have the name of it is part of some sort of classical score. Everything on here is like public domain, right? The background music's all public domain. It's a cello, a cello, a cello. It's jello. If you change one letter, that word becomes edible. Yes, edible cello. That's not the thing I want. Here we go. Shake my head around. Okay, I'm still happy with it. All right, cool. We'll push our luck. Where were we? We're taking a sip. Chapter 5, More Strange Instructions. When I came from my room at 11:30, I found all well in the sick room. The new nurse, prim, neat, and watchful, sat in the chair by the bedside where Nurse Kennedy had sat last night. A little way off, between the bed and the safe, sat Dr. Winchester, alert and wakeful, but looking strange and almost comic, with the respirator over mouth and nose. As I stood in the doorway looking at them, I heard a slight sound. Turning round, I saw the new detective, who nodded, held up the finger of silence, and withdrew quietly. Hitherto, no one of the watchers was overcome by sleep. I took a chair outside the door, and yet there was no need for me to risk coming again under the subtle influence of last night. Naturally, my thoughts went revolving round the main incidents of the last day and night, and I found myself arriving at strange conclusions, doubts, conjectures. But I did not lose myself, as on last night, in trains of thought. The sense of the present was ever with me, and I really felt as should a sentry on guard. And I really felt, as a sentry on guard. Okay, that makes sense. Thinking is not a slow process, and when it is earnest, the time can pass quickly. It seemed a very short time indeed till the door, usually left ajar, was pulled open, and when Dr. Winchester emerged, taking off his respirator as he came. His act, when he had it off, was demonstrative of his keenness. He turned up the outside of the wrap and smelled it carefully. "I'm going now," he said. "I shall come early in the morning, unless, of course, I am sent for before. But all seems well tonight." The next to appear was Sergeant Daw, who went quietly into the room and took the seat vacated by the doctor. I still remained outside, but every few minutes looked into the room. This was rather a form than a matter of utility. For the room was so dark that coming even from the dimly lit corridor, it was hard to distinguish anything. Maybe light the place up a little bit. They don't need to sleep in there. That's not their purpose. It's crazy. Turn some freaking lights on. A little before 12 o'clock, Miss Trelawney came from her room. Before coming to her father's, she went into that occupied by Nurse Kennedy. Father's room. After a couple of minutes, she came out looking, I thought, a trifle more cheerful. She had her respirator in her hand, but before putting it on, asked me if anything special had occurred since she had gone to lie down. I answered in a whisper. There was no loud talking in the house tonight. That all was safe, was well. She then put on her respirator and I mine, and we entered the room. The detective and the nurse rose up, and we took their places. Sergeant Daw was the last to go out. He closed the door behind him, as we had arranged. For a while I sat quiet, my heart beating. The place was grimly dark. The only light was a faint one from the top of the lamp, which threw a white circle on the high ceiling, except the emerald sheen of the shade as the light took its under edges. Okay. Even the light only seemed to emphasize the blackness of the shadows. These presently began to seem, as on last night, to have a sentience of their own. I did not myself feel in the least sleepy, and each time I went softly to look over at the patient, which I did about every 10 minutes, I could see that Miss Trelawney was keenly alert. Every quarter of an hour, one or other of the policemen looked in through the partly opened door. Each time, both Miss Trelawney and I said through our mufflers, "All right," and the door was closed again. As the time wore on, the silence and the darkness seemed to increase. The circle of light on the ceiling was still there, but it seemed less brilliant than at first. The green edging of the lampshade became like Maori greenstone rather than emerald. The sounds of the night without the house and the starlight, spreading pale lines along the edges of the window cases, made the pall of black within more solemn and more mysterious. We heard the clock in the corridor, chiming the quarters with its silver bell till 2 o'clock, and then a strange feeling came over me. I could see from Miss Trelawney's movement as she looked around that she also had some new sensation. The new detective had just looked in. We were two alone with the unconscious patient for another quarter of an hour. We too were alone, as in TWO. We were both alone with the unconscious patient for another quarter of an hour. My heart began to beat wildly. There was a sense of fear over me, not for myself. My fear was impersonal. It seemed as though some new person had entered the room, and that a strong intelligence was awake close to me. Something brushed against my leg. I put my hand down hastily and touched the furry coat of Silvio. With a very faint, faraway sound of a snarl, he turned and scratched at me. I felt blood on my hand. I rose gently and came over to the bedside. Miss Trelawney too had stood up and was looking behind her as though there was something close to her. Her eyes were wild, and her breast rose and fell as though she were fighting for air. When I touched her, she did not seem to feel me. She worked her hands in front of her as though she was fending off something. There was not an instant to lose. I seized her in my arms and rushed over to the door, threw it open and strode into the passage, calling loudly, "Help! Help!" In an instant, 2 detectives, Mrs. Grant and the nurse, appeared on the scene. Close on her heels came several of the servants, both men and women. Immediately, Mrs. Grant came near enough. I placed Miss Trelawney in her arms and rushed back into the room, turning up the electric light as soon as I could lay my hand on it. Sergeant Daw and the nurse followed me. We were just in time. Close under the great safe, where on the 2 successive nights he had been found, lay Mr. Trelawney with his left arm, bare save for the bandages stretched out. Close by his side was a leaf-shaped Egyptian knife which had lain amongst the curios on the shelf of the broken cabinet. Its point was stuck in the parquet floor, whence he had been removed from... Its point was stuck in the parquet floor, whence had been removed the blood-stained rug. Oh, there was a rug there before. It's gone now, yes. Parquet? Sure, that's how you say it. Probably only you in the entire world. But there was no sign of disturbance anywhere, nor any sign of anyone or anything unusual. The policeman and I searched the room accurately, whilst the nurse and 2 of the servants lifted the wounded man back to bed. But no sign or clue could we get. Very soon Miss Trelawney returned to the room. She was pale but collected. When she came close to me, she said in a low voice, "I felt myself fainting. I did not know why, but I was afraid." The only other shock I had was when Miss Trelawney cried out to me, as I placed my hand on the bed to lean over and look carefully at her father. "You are wounded. Look, your hand is bloody. There is blood on the sheets." I had, in the excitement, quite forgotten Silvio's scratch. As I looked at it, the recollection came back to me, but before I could say a word, Miss Trelawney had caught hold of my hand and lifted it up. When she saw the parallel lines of the cuts, she cried out again, "It's the same wound as father's." She laid my hand down gently but quickly and said to me and to Sergeant Daw, "Come to my room. Silvio is there in his basket." We followed her and found Silvio sitting in his basket, awake. He was licking his paws. The detective said, "He is there, sure enough, but why licking his paws?" "Friend, cats lick their paws." Margaret, Miss Trelawney, gave a moan as she bent over and looked and took one of the 4 paws in her hand. The cat seemed to resent it and snarled. At that, Mrs. Grant came into the room when she saw what we were looking at. When she saw that we were looking at the cat, she said, "The nurse tells me that Silvio was asleep on Nurse Kennedy's bed ever since you went to your father's room until a while ago. He came there just after you had gone to Master's room. Nurse says that Nurse Kennedy is moaning and muttering in her sleep as though she had a nightmare. I think we should send for Dr. Winchester." "Do so at once, please," said Miss Trelawney, and went back to the room. For a while Miss Trelawney stood looking at her father, with her brows wrinkled. Then, turning to me, as though her mind were made up, she said, "Don't you think we should have a consultation on father? Of course, I have every confidence in Dr. Winchester. He seems an immensely clever young man, but he is a young man, and there must be men who have devoted themselves to this branch of science. Such a man would have more knowledge and more experience, and his knowledge and experience might help to throw light on poor father's case. As it is, Dr. Winchester seems to be quite in the dark. Oh, I don't know what to do. It is all so terrible." So there's that damsel in distress line right at the end of all her dialogues, just to remind everybody that she's in distress and womanly and needs men to solve her problems for her. Here she broke down a little and cried, and I tried to comfort her, because I have the wisdom of my manhood. That's what my manhood wisdom tells me to do. Dr. Winchester arrived quickly. His first thought was for his patient, but when he found him without further harm, he visited Nurse Kennedy. When he saw her, a hopeful look came into his eyes. Taking a towel and dipping a corner of it in cold water, and flicked it on the face. The skin colored and she stirred slightly. He said to the new nurse, Sister Doris, he called her. She is all right. She will wake in a few hours at latest. She may be dizzy and distraught at first, or perhaps hysterical. If so, you know how to treat her. Yeah, with a hammer? Yes, sir, answered Sister Doris demurely. Yes, sir, I guess. And we went back to Mr. Trelawney's room. As soon as we had entered, Mrs. Grant and the nurse went out, so that only Dr. Winchester, Miss Trelawney, and myself remained in the room. When the door had been closed, Dr. Winchester asked me as to what had occurred. I told him fully, giving exactly every detail so far as I could remember. Throughout my narrative, which did not take long, however, he kept asking me questions as to who had been present, and in order which each one had come into the room. He asked other things, but nothing of any importance. These were all that took my attention, or remained in my memory. When our conversation was finished, he said in a very decided way, indeed, to Miss Trelawney. A slap across the face, yeah. Hysteria solved by a good dose of slap across the face. I think, Miss Trelawney, that we had better have a consultation on this case. She answered at once, seemingly a little to his surprise. I'm glad you have mentioned it. I quite agree. Who would you suggest? Have you any choice yourself? He asked. Anyone to whom your father is known? Has he ever consulted anyone? Not to my knowledge. But I hope you will choose whoever you think would be best. My dear father should have all the help that can be had, and I shall be deeply obliged by your choosing. Who is the best man in London? Anywhere else in such a case? There are several good men, but they are scattered all over the world. Somehow the brain specialist is born, not made, though a lot of hard work goes to the completing of him and fitting him for his work. He comes from no country. The most daring investigator up to the present is ch8, the Japanese, but he is rather a surgical experimentalist than a practitioner. Then there's Zammerfest in Uppsala, and Fenelon of the University of Paris, and Morfessi of Naples. These, of course, are in addition to our own men, Morrison of Aberdeen, Richardson of Birmingham. But before them all, I would put Freire of King's College. Oh, hello, Bunny. Causing me trouble. I'd better sit upright. All right, thank you very much. Welcome to the stream and the story. We're presently talking about experts about the world. The greatest of all, apparently, is Freire, F-R-E-R-E, of King's College. Of all that I have named, he best unites theory and practice. He has no hobbies that have been discovered at all events, and his experience is immense. It is the regret of all of us who admire him that the nerve so firm and the hand so dexterous must yield to time. For my own part, I would rather have Freire than anyone living. Then, said Miss Trelawney decisively, let us have Dr. Freire. By the way, is he Doctor or Mr.? As early as we can get him in the morning. A weight seemed removed from him, as he spoke with greater ease and geniality than he had yet shown. He is Sir James Freire. I shall go to him myself as early as it is possible to see him, and shall ask him to come here at once. How convenient that the greatest of them all just happens to be, a hop, skip, and a jump across town. Then turning to me, he said, "You had better let me dress your hand." "It is nothing," I said. "Nevertheless, it should be seen to. A scratch from any animal might turn out dangerous. There is nothing like being safe." I submitted. Forthwith he began to dress my hand. He examined with a magnifying glass the several parallel wounds and compared them with the slip of blotting paper, marked with Silvio's claws, which he took from his pocketbook. He put back the paper, simply remarking, "It's a pity that Silvio slips in and out just when he shouldn't." Yeah, cat scratches definitely need care. I don't know, Valena. We suffer a lot of cat scratches without care. Mind you, we don't bleed like that most of the time. The morning wore slowly on. By 10 o'clock, Nurse Kennedy had so far recovered that she was able to sit up and talk intelligibly. But she was still hazy in her thoughts and could not remember anything that had happened on the previous night after her taking her place by the sickbed. As yet, she seemed neither to know nor care what had happened. It's a little cold. It was nearly 11 o'clock when Dr. Winchester returned with Sir James Freary. Somehow I felt my heart sink when from the landing I saw them in the hall below. I knew that Miss Trelawney was to have the pain of telling yet another stranger of her ignorance of her father's life. Sir James Freary was a man who commanded attention, followed by respect. He knew so thoroughly what he wanted himself that he placed at once on one side all wishes and ideas of less definite persons. The mere flash of his piercing eyes, or the set of his resolute mouth, or the lowering of his great eyebrows seemed to compel immediate and willing obedience to his wishes. Somehow, when he had all been introduced, and he was well amongst us, all sense of mystery seemed to melt away. It was with a hopeful spirit that I saw him pass into the sick room with Dr. Winchester. They remained in the room a long time. Once they sent for the nurse, the new one, Sister Doris, but she did not remain long. Again they went into Nurse Kennedy's room. He sent out the nurse attendant on her. Dr. Winchester told me afterward that Nurse Kennedy, though she was ignorant of later matters, gave full and satisfactory answers to all Dr. Freary's questions relating to her patient up to the time she became unconscious. Then they went to the study, where they remained so long, and their voices raised in heated discussions seemed in such determined opposition that I began to feel uneasy. As for Miss Trelawney, she was almost in a state of collapse from nervousness before they joined us. Poor girl. She had had a sadly anxious time of it, and her nervous strength had almost broken down. They came out at last. Sir James first, his grave face looking as unenlightening as that of the Sphinx. Dr. Winchester followed him closely. His face was pale, but with a kind of pallor which looked like a reaction. I don't know how that works, but words say that. It gave me the idea that it had been read not long before. Sir James asked that Miss Trelawney would come into the study. He suggested that I should come also. When we had entered, Sir James turned to me and said, "I understand from Dr. Winchester that you are a friend of Miss Trelawney, and that you have already considerable knowledge of this case. Perhaps it will be well that you should be with us. I know you are already as a keen lawyer. Let me start that again. I know you already as a keen lawyer, Mr. Ross, though I never had the pleasure of meeting you. As Dr. Winchester tells me that there are some strange matters outside this case which seem to puzzle him and others, and in which he thinks you may yet be specially interested. It might be as well that you should know every phase of the case. For myself, I do not take much account of mysteries, except those of science. And as there seems to be some idea of an attempt at assassination or robbery, all I can say is that if assassins were at work, they ought to take some elementary lessons in anatomy before their next job, for they seem thoroughly ignorant. If robbery were their purpose, they seem to have worked with marvelous inefficiency. That, however, is not my business. Here he took a big pinch of snuff, and turning to Miss Trelawney went on. Now as to the patient. Leaving out the cause of his illness, all we can say at present is that he appears to be suffering from a marked lack of catalepsy. At present nothing can be done except to sustain his strength. The treatment of my friend, Dr. Winchester, is mainly such as I approve of, and I am confident that should any slight change arise, he will be able to deal with it satisfactorily. That's a game, satisfactory. We use polyspore, and that is scary. Yeah, for the deeper ones, I guess. Yeah. At present, nothing can be done to accept it. So, you keep thinking Professor Trelawney from Harry Potter. I don't know which one that is. As I like, Valana might know which one that is. She probably knows which one that is. I did not pay much attention to Harry Potter. Yeah. Oh, where was I? Okay, satisfactorily. Here we go. It is an interesting case, most interesting. And should any new or abnormal development arise, I should be happy to come at any time. There is just one thing to which I wish to call your attention, and I put it to you, Miss Trelawney, directly, since it is your responsibility. Dr. Winchester informs me that you are not yourself free in the matter, but are bound by an instruction given by your father in case just such a condition of things should arise. I would strongly advise that the patient be removed to another room, or, as an alternative, that those mummies and all such things should be removed from his chamber. Why, it's enough to put any man into an abnormal condition to have such an assemblage of horrors around him, and to breathe the atmosphere which they exhale. You have evidence already of how such mephitic odor may act. That nurse, Kennedy, I think you said, Doctor, isn't yet out of her state of catalepsy, and you know, Mr. Ross, have, I am told, experienced something of the same effects. I know this. Here his eyebrows came down more than ever, and his mouth hardened. If I were in charge here, I should insist on the patient having a different atmosphere, or I would throw up the case. Dr. Winchester already knows that I can only be again consulted on this condition being fulfilled. But I trust that you will see your way, as a good daughter to my mind, should to looking to your father's health and sanity rather than to any whim of his, whether supported or not by a foregoing fear, or by any number of penny dreadful mysteries. The day has hardly come yet, and I am glad to say when the British Museum and St. Thomas's hospitals have exchanged their normal functions. Good day, Miss Trelawney. I earnestly hope that I may soon see your father restored. Remember that should you fulfill the elementary condition which I have laid down, I am at your service day or night. Good morning, Mr. Ross. I hope you will be able to report to me soon, Dr. Winchester. Someone laying down a bit of reality on the folks. Imagine that. Fist bumps. I think it well to say that to my mind, speaking purely as a physician, he is quite right. I feel as if I could have assaulted him when he made it a condition of not giving up the case, but all the same, he is right. He is right as to treatment. He does not understand that there is something odd about this special case, and he will not realize the knot that we are all tied up in by Mr. Trelawney's instructions, of course. He was interrupted by Miss Trelawney. Dr. Winchester, do you too wish to give up the case, or are you willing to continue it under the conditions you know? Give it up. Less now than never, Miss Trelawney. I shall never give it up so long as life is left to him or any of us. She said nothing, but held out her hand, which he took warmly. Now, she said, if Sir James Freary is a type of the cult of specialists, I want no more of them. To start with, he does not seem to know any more than you do about my father's condition, and if he were 100th part as much interested in it as you are, he would not stand on such punctilio. Of course, I am only too anxious about my poor father, and if I can see a way to meet either of Sir James Freary's conditions, he had two, I shall do so. I shall ask Mr. Marvin to come here today and advise me as to the limit of father's wishes. If he thinks I am free to act in any way on my own responsibility, I shall not hesitate to do so. Then Dr. Winchester took his leave. Miss Trelawney sat down and wrote a letter to Mr. Marvin, telling him of the state of affairs, and asking him to come and see her and to bring with him any papers which might throw any light on the subject. She sent the letter off with the carriage to bring back the solicitor. We waited with what patience we could for his coming. It is not a very long journey for oneself from Kensington Palace Gardens to Lincoln's Inn Fields, but it seems endlessly long when waiting for someone else to take it. All things, however, are amenable to time. It was less than an hour all told when Mr. Marvin was with us. Hello, Queen. Thank you for the hydrate once more. She just loves that. Is she streaming? Are you streaming, Queen? Do you sneak a stream in? I don't think so. No, it does not look like it. Nope, no streaming. Okay. We have this habit these days of what is it, like hydrate fights during streams. He recognized Miss Trelawney's impatience, and when he had learned sufficient of her father's illness, he said to her, "Whenever you are ready, I can go with you into particulars regarding your father's wishes." "Whenever you like," she said, with an evident ignorance of his meaning. "Why not now?" He looked at me, as if to a fellow man of business, and stammered out, "We are not alone." "I have brought Mr. Ross here on purpose," she answered. "He knows so much at present that I want him to know more." The solicitor was a little disconcerted, a thing which those knowing him only in courts would hardly have believed. He answered, however, with some hesitation. But, my dear young lady, your father's wishes, confidence between father and child." Here she interrupted him. There was a tinge of red in her pale cheeks as she did so. "Do you really think that applies to present circumstances, Mr. Marvin? My father never told me anything of his affairs, and I can now, in this sad extremity, only learn his wishes through a gentleman who was a stranger to me, and whom I never even heard till I got my father's letter written to be shown to me only in extremity. Mr. Ross is a new friend, but he has all my confidence, and I should like him to be present. Unless, of course," she added, "such a thing is forbidden by my father. Oh, forgive me, Mr. Marvin, if I seem rude, but I have been in such dreadful trouble and anxiety lately, and I have hardly command of myself." It's always an excuse. "Yeah, but this man is not your husband, yeah." "But he might want to be, in the grand wisdom of his manhood," etc., etc. She covered her eyes with her hand for a few seconds. We two men looked at each other and waited, trying to appear unmoved. She went on more firmly. She had recovered herself. Thank goodness. She's recovered. And the men were able to master their emotions and looked unmoved and inconsiderate. Thank goodness. Please do not think I am ungrateful to you for your kindness in coming here so quickly. Because, you have to beg for the service that's been paid for already. I really am grateful, and I have every confidence in your judgment. If you wish or think it best, we can be alone. I stood up. Mr. Marvin made a dissentient gesture. He was evidently pleased with her attitude, and there was geniality in his voice and manner as he spoke. Not at all. There is no restriction on your father's part, and on my own I am quite willing. Indeed, all told, it may be better. From what you have said of Mr. Trelawney's illness and the other incidental matters, it will be well in case of any grave eventuality that it was understood from the first that circumstances were ruled by your father's own imperative instructions. For, please understand me, his instructions are imperative. Most imperative. Ooh, Lily, thank you for the head pat, dear. I hope you're doing well and have grown a little taller. Most imperative. They're so unyielding that he has given me a power of eternity, power of attorney, under which I have undertaken to act, authorizing me to see his written wishes carried out. Please believe me once for all that he intended fully everything mentioned in that letter to you. Whilst he is alive, he is to remain in his own room, and none of his property is to be removed from it under any circumstances whatever. He has even given an inventory of the articles which are not to be displaced. Miss Trelawney was silent. She looked somewhat distressed, so, thinking that I understood the immediate cause, I asked, "May we see the list?" Miss Trelawney's face at once brightened, but it fell again as the lawyer answered promptly. He was evidently prepared for the question. "Not unless I am compelled to take action on the power of attorney. I have brought that instrument with me. You will recognize, Mr. Ross," and he said this with a sort of business conviction which I had noticed in his professional work, as he handed me the deed, how strongly it is worded, and how the grantor made his wishes apparent in such a way as to leave no loophole. It is his own wording, except for certain legal formalities, and I assure you I have seldom seen a more ironclad document. Even I myself have no power to make the slightest relaxation of the instructions, without committing a distinct breach of faith. And that, I need not tell you, is impossible." He evidently added the last words in order to prevent an appeal to his personal consideration. He did not like the seeming harshness of his words, however, for he added, "I do hope, Miss Trelawney, that you understand that I am willing, frankly and unequivocally willing, to do anything I can within the limits of my power to relieve your distress. But your father had, in all his doings, some purpose of his own which he did not disclose to me. So far as I can see, there is not a word of his instructions that he had not thought over fully. Whatever idea he had in his mind was the idea of a lifetime, and he had studied it in every possible phase and was prepared to guard it at every point. Now I fear I have distressed you, and I am truly sorry for it, for I see you have much, too much to bear already. But I have no alternative. If you want to consult me at any time about anything, I promise you I will come without a moment's delay. At any hour of the day or night, there is my private address." He scribbled in his pocketbook as he spoke, "and under the address of my club, where I am generally to be found in the evening." He tore out the paper and handed it to her. She thanked him. He shook hands with her and with me and withdrew. I love these experts that we're bringing in. We're rolling them in one after the other off of the expert factory floor. I am such a grand and powerful individual. I command authority and respect in my field. I will do anything for you within my power. Oh, by the way, I have absolutely no power to change anything. But other than that, I am such a great and benevolent person and at your disposal. Except I can't do anything. Worthless. Worthless, impotent characters. As soon as the hall door was shut on him, Mrs. Grant tapped to the door and came in. There was such a look of distress in her face that Miss Trelawney stood up deadly white and asked her, "What is it, Mrs. Grant? What is it? Any new trouble?" "I grieve to say, miss, that the servants, all but 2, have given notice and want to leave the house today. They have talked the matter over amongst themselves. The butler has spoken for the rest. He says as how they are willing to forgo their wages and even to pay their legal obligations instead of notice, but that go today they must." "What reason do they give?" "Yeah, get out of this cursed house." "None, miss. They say as how they're sorry, but they've nothing to say. I asked Jane, the upper housemaid, miss, who is not with the rest, but stops on, and she tells me confidential that they've got some notion in their silly heads that the house is haunted." We ought to have laughed, but we didn't. I could not look in Miss Trelawney's face and laugh. The pain and horror there showed no paroxysm. Why do you use X's? The pain and horror there showed no sudden paroxysm of fear. We're gonna go with that. It's probably Xism, paroxysm. Showed no sudden something of fear. There was a fixed idea of which this was a confirmation. Fixed idea of which this... I have no idea what this sentence says. For myself, it seemed as if my brain had found a voice. Your brain has a voice. It has an inner voice, and then your mouth is its outer voice. It was never lost, but the voice was not complete. There was some other thought, darker and deeper, which lay behind it, whose voice had not sounded as yet. I am fucking up words and getting words and sentences twisted back to front, like such dramatic, but the voice was not complete. There was some other thought, darker and deeper, which lay behind it, whose voice had not sounded. I screwed it up again. Which lay behind it, whose voice had not sounded as yet. It's not as dramatic either. Had not as yet sounded. Whose voice had not as yet sounded. But that's not what it says. Stupid book. Someone should teach Bram Stoker how to write books. Chapter 6. Suspicions. The first to get full self-command was Miss Trelawney. There was a haughty dignity in her bearing as she said, "Very well, Mrs. Grant, let them go. Pay them up to today, a month's wages. They have hitherto been very good servants, and the occasion of their leaving is not an ordinary one. We must not expect such faithfulness from anyone who is beset with fears. Those who remain are to have in future double wages." Oh, bribery. "And please send these to me presently when I send word." Mrs. Grant bristled with smothered indignation. All the housekeeper in her was outraged by such generous treatment of servants who had combined to give notice. I mean, they're scared, and it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to want out of a scary situation. That's a normal reaction. Just calm down, Mrs. Grant. "They don't deserve it, miss. Let them to go on so, after the way they've been treated here. Never in my life have I seen servants so well treated, or anyone so good to them and gracious to them as you have been." That's right. The protagonists in our books always treat their slaves and servants the best. They might be in the household of a king for treatment, and now, just as there is trouble, to go and act like this. It's abominable, that's what it is. Miss Trelawney was very gentle with her, and smothered her ruffled dignity, so that presently she went away with, in her manner, a lesser measure of hostility to the undeserving. In quite a different frame of mind, she returned presently to ask if her mistress would like to engage a full staff of other servants, or at any rate try to do so. For you know, ma'am, she went on, when once a scare has been established in the servants' hall, it's well nigh impossible to get rid of it. Servants may come, but they will go away just as quick. There's no holding them. They simply won't stay, or even if they work out their month's notice, they lead you that life that you wish every hour of the day that you hadn't kept them. All right, they're grumpy servants. The women are bad enough, the hussies, but the men are worse. There was neither anxiety nor indignation in Miss Trelawney's voice or manner as she said, I think, Mrs. Grant, we had better try to do with those we have. Whilst my dear father is ill, we shall not be having any company, so that there will be only 3 now in the house to attend to. If those servants who are willing to stay are not enough, I should only get sufficient to help them do the work. It will not, I should think, be difficult to get a few maids, perhaps some that you know already, and please bear in mind that those whom you get, and who are suitable will stay, are henceforth to have the same wages as those who are remaining. Of course, Mrs. Grant, you well enough understand that though I do not group you in any way with the servants, the rule of double salary applies to you too. As she spoke, she extended her long, fine-shaped hand, which the other took, and then, raising it to her lips, kissed it impressively, with the freedom of an elder woman to a younger. I could not but admire the generosity of her treatment of her servants. In my mind, I endorsed Mrs. Grant's sotto voice remark as she left the room. No wonder the house is like a king's house, when the mistress is a princess. Ugh. It was kind of painful to read that last paragraph and that sentence. It's a lot of self-aggrandizement. Like third-party cringe. I feel cringy for them. Hey, princess, someone shouted this. That was it. The idea seemed to satisfy my mind and to bring back in a wave of light the first moment when she swept across my vision at the ball in Belgrave Square. A queenly figure, tall and slim, bending, swaying, undulating as the lily or the lotus. Clad in a flowing gown of some filmy black material shot with gold. The best color combination. For ornament, in her hair she wore an old Egyptian jewel, a tiny crystal disc set between rising plumes carved in lapis lazuli. On her wrist was a broad bangle or a bracelet of antique work, in the shape of a pair of spreading wings wrought in gold, with the feathers made of colored gems. For all her gracious bearing toward me, when our hostess introduced me, I was then afraid of her. It was only when, later, at the picnic on the river, I had come to realize her sweet and gentle, that my awe changed to something else. I think it was disturbing joys and manhood wisdom. Yes, that's what it changed to. Valana, the wisdom of manhood. That's what it turned into. For a while she sat, making some notes or memoranda. Then, putting them away, she sent for the faithful servants. I thought that she had better have this interview alone, and so left her. When I came back there were traces of tears in her eyes. The next phase in which I had a part was even more disturbing and infinitely more painful. Late in the afternoon, Sergeant Daw came into the study where I was sitting. After closing the door carefully and looking all round the room to make certain we were alone, he came close to me. "What is it?" I asked him. "I see you wish to speak to me privately." "Quite so, sir. May I speak in absolute confidence?" Like, you... No, I assumed you wanted to speak privately so that I could pass on what you're saying to everyone else. "Quite so, sir." "Oh, yeah, sir. Of course you may. In anything that is for the good of Miss Trelawney, and of course, Mr. Trelawney, you may be perfectly frank. I take it that we both want to serve them to the best of our powers." He hesitated before replying. "Of course, you know that I have my duty to do, and I think you know me well enough to know that I will do it. I am a policeman, a detective, and it is my duty to find out the facts of any case I am put on, without fear or favor to anyone. I would rather speak to you alone in confidence if I may, without reference to any duty of anyone to anyone, except mine to Scotland Yard." Of course, I answered mechanically, my heart sinking. I did not know why. "Be quite frank with me, I assure you of my confidence." "Thank you, sir. I take it that what I say is not to pass beyond you, not to anyone. Not to Miss Trelawney herself, or even to Mr. Trelawney when he becomes well again." "Certainly, if you make it a condition," I said a little more stiffly. The man recognized the change in my voice or manner and said apologetically, "Excuse me, sir, but I am going outside my duty in speaking to you at all on the subject. I know you, however, of old, and I feel that I can trust you. Not your words, sir. That is all right, but your discretion." I bowed. "Go on," I said, and he began at once. "I have gone over this case, sir, till my brain begins to reel, but I can't find any ordinary solution of it. At the time of each attempt, no one has seemingly come into the house, and certainly no one has got out. What does it strike you is the inference? That somebody or something was in the house already," I answered, smiling in spite of myself. "That's just what I think," he said, with a manifest sigh of relief. "Very well. Who can be that someone?" "Someone or something was what I said," I answered. "Let us make it someone, Mr. Ross. That cat, though he may have scratched or bit, never pulled the old gentleman out of bed and tried to get the bangle with the key off his arm. Such things are all very well in books where your amateur detectives who know everything before it's done can fit them into theories, but in Scotland Yard, yeah, that's right, she's back. Where the men aren't all idiots either, we generally find that when crime is done or attempted, it's people, not things, that are at the bottom of it." "Then make it people by all means, Sergeant." "We were speaking of someone, sir." "Quite right, someone be it. Did it ever strike you, sir, that on each of the 3 separate occasions where outrage was effected or attempted, there was one person who was the first to be present and to give the alarm?" "Let me see. Miss Trelawney, I believe, gave the alarm on the first occasion. I present myself, if fast asleep, on the second, and so was Nurse Kennedy. When I woke, there were several people in the room. You were one of them. I understand that on that occasion also Miss Trelawney was before you. At the last attempt, I was in the room when Miss Trelawney fainted. I carried her out and went back. In returning, I was first, and I think you were close behind me." Sergeant Daw thought for a moment before replying. "She was present, or first, in the room on all the occasions. There was only damage done in the first and second." The inference was one which I, as a lawyer, could not mistake. I thought the best thing to do was to meet it halfway. I have always found that the best way to encounter an inference is encounter an inference is to cause it to be turned into a statement. You mean, I said, that as on the only occasions when actual harm was done, Miss Trelawney's being the first to discover it is a proof that she did it, or was in some way connected with the attempt, as well as the discovery. I didn't venture to put it as clear as that, but that is where the doubt which I had leads. Sergeant Daw was a man of courage. He evidently did not shrink from any conclusion of his reasoning on facts. We do have ads coming already. That was fast. We're going to highlight this little section here. We're gonna pop these ads. Stand up, go away, do things, come back, and read some more. That's how ads work. Okay, and I'm back. And everyone else is back. Welcome back, everybody. Everybody. Check my lips. This is what happens when I get too close to the mic. It thinks my mouth is open. Alright. Where were we? We were both silent for a while. Fears began crowding in on my own mind. Not doubts of Miss Trelawney or of any act of hers, but fears lest such acts be misunderstood. There was evidently a mystery somewhere, and if no solution to it could be found, the doubt would be cast on someone. And let us, remember, this is the third time our Mr. Ross has met Miss Trelawney. We don't actually know her. Think we do. We say we do. She acts the victim. She is seductive in that sense. She inspires the man to protect her. Men are such easy creatures. Ads. I think Sid is enjoying this book. Time is flying. It's okay. I'm kind of waiting for something to happen, if I'm being honest. It is a little bit slow. In such cases, the guesses of the majority are bound to follow the line of least resistance. And if it could be proved that any personal gain to anyone could follow Mr. Trelawney's death, should such ensue, it might prove a difficult task for anyone to prove innocence in the face of suspicious facts. I found myself instinctively taking that deferential course which, until the plan of battle of the prosecution is unfolded, is so safe an attitude for the defense. It would never do for me, at this stage, to combat any theories which a detective might form. I could best help Miss Trelawney by listening and understanding. When the time should come for the dissipation and obliteration of the theories, I should be quite willing to use all my militant ardor and all the weapons at my command. You're a lawyer, boy. You don't have any militant ardor. Ardor. You are. You will, of course, do your duty, I know, I said, and without fear, what course do you intend to take? I don't know as yet, sir. You see, up to now, it isn't with me even a suspicion. If anyone else told me that sweet young lady had a hand in such a matter, I would think him a fool. But I am bound to follow my own conclusions. I know well that just as unlikely persons have been proven guilty, when a whole court, except all the prosecution who knew the facts, and the judge who had taught his mind to wait, would have sworn to innocence. I wouldn't, for all the world, wrong such a young lady. Yeah, such a young lady, especially a rich, beautiful one, more especially when she has such a cruel weight to bear. Oh yes, there's that, and her dad. And you will be sure that I won't say a word that'll prompt anyone else to make such a charge. That's why I speak to you in confidence, man to man. You are skilled in proofs. That is your profession. Mine only gets so far as suspicions, and what we call our own proofs, which are nothing but ex parte evidence after all. You know Miss Trelawney better than I do, and though I watch round the sick room and go where I like about the house and in and out of it, I haven't the same opportunities as you have knowing the lady and what her life is, or her means are, or of anything else which might give me a clue to her actions. If I were to try to find out from her, it would at once arouse her suspicions. Then, if she were guilty, all possibility of ultimate proof would go, for she would easily find a way to baffle discovery. Except for DNA testing, just gotta do some DNA testing. But if she be innocent, as I hope she is, it would be doing a cruel wrong to her to accuse her. I have thought the matter over according to my lights before I spoke to you, and if I have taken a liberty, sir, I am truly sorry. No liberty in the world, Daw, I said warmly, for the man's courage and honesty and consideration compelled respect. I am glad you have spoken to me so frankly. We both want to find out the truth, and there is so much about this case that is strange, so strange as to go beyond all experiences. That to aim at truth is our only chance of making anything clear in the long run, no matter what our views are, or what object we wish to achieve ultimately. The sergeant looked pleased as he went on. I thought, therefore, that if you had it once in your mind that somebody else held to such a possibility, you would by degrees get proof, or at any rate such ideas would convince yourself either for or against it. Then we would come to some conclusion, or at any rate we should also exhaust all other possibilities that the most likely one would remain as the nearest thing to proof, or strong suspicion, that we could get. After that, we should have to... Just at this moment, the door opened, and Miss Trelawney entered the room. The moment she saw us, she drew back quickly, saying, "Oh, I beg pardon. I did not know you were here and engaged." By the time I had stood up, she was about to go back. "Do come in," I said. "Sergeant Daw and I were only talking matters over." Whilst she was hesitating, Mrs. Grant appeared, saying as she entered the room, "Dr. Winchester has come, miss, and is asking for you." I obeyed Miss Trelawney's look. Together, we left the room. When the doctor had made his examination, he told us that there was seemingly no change. He added that nevertheless, we would like to stay in the house my brain stopped. He added that nevertheless, he would like to stay in the house that night if he might. Miss Trelawney looked glad and sent word to Mrs. Grant to get a room ready for him, and perhaps hire another maid. Later in the day, when he and I happened to be alone together, he said suddenly, "I have arranged to stay here tonight because I want to have a talk with you. And as I wish to be quite private, I thought the least suspicious way would be to have a cigar together late in the evening when Miss Trelawney is watching her father." We still kept to our arrangement that either the sick man's daughter or I should be on watch all night. We were to share the duty at the early hours of the morning. I was anxious about this, for I knew from our conversation that the detective would watch in secret himself, and would be particularly alert about that time. The day passed uneventfully. Miss Trelawney slept in the afternoon, and after dinner went to relieve the nurse. Mrs. Grant remained with her, Sergeant Daw being on duty in the corridor. Dr. Winchester and I, our coffee in the library. When we had lit our cigars, he said quietly, "Now that we are alone, I want to have a confidential talk. We are tiled, of course, for the present at all events." "Tiled?" "Quite so," I said, my heart sinking as I thought of my conversation with Sergeant Daw in the morning, and of the disturbing and harrowing fears which it had left in my mind. He went on, "This case is enough to try the sanity of all of us concerned in it. The more I think of it, the madder I seem to get, and the two lines, each continually strengthened, seem to pull harder in opposite directions." And my brain just realized my phone just bleeped. sounds and do not disturb. Thank you very much. Right. Sanity is being pulled in opposite directions. That's why there's a sanity stat in games that are based on this. What 2 lines? He looked at me keenly for a moment before replying. Dr. Winchester's look at such moments was apt to be disconcerting. It would have been so to me had I a personal part. It would have been so to me had I had a personal part. Ooh, another hydrate. Thank you again, Queen. To get fruit juice. I had to refill my glass. I'm going to be quite hydrated by the end of the night, I'm certain. It's like vengeance. Where is my place in the story? Right. It would have been so to me had I had a personal part, other than my interest in Miss Trelawney in the matter. As it was, however, I stood it unruffled. His look or something? I was now an attorney in the case, an amicus curiae. Curiae. Can we just stop with French? Can we read books that aren't from France? In one sense, and another retained for defense. For the defense. The mere thought that in this clever man's mind were 2 lines, equally strong and opposite, was in itself so consoling as to neutralize my anxiety as to a new attack. As he began to speak, the doctor's face wore an inscrutable smile. This, however, gave place to a stern gravity as he proceeded. 2 lines, fact and fancy. In the first, there is this whole thing, attacks, attempts at robbery and murder, stupefyings, organized catalepsy, which points to either criminal hypnotism and thought suggestion, or some simple form of poisoning unclassified yet in our toxicology. In the other, there is some influence at work which is not classified in any book that I know, outside the pages of romance. I never felt in my life so strongly the truth of Hamlet's words. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Dreamt of in your philosophy. Here's a counter to that. How do you know there are more things in heaven and earth if you can't even dream of them in your philosophy? Your philosophy. Anyways, let us take the fact side first. Here we have a man in his home, amidst his own household, plenty of servants of different classes in the house, which forbids the possibility of an organized attempt made from the servants' hall. He is wealthy, learned, clever. From his physiognomy, there is no doubting that he is a man of iron will and determined purpose. Well, there's lots of doubt. In fact, it's a disproven field of thinking. His daughter, his only child, I take it, a young girl, bright and clever, is sleeping in the very next room to his. There is seemingly no possible reason for expecting any attack or disturbance of any kind, and no reasonable opportunity for any outsider to affect it. And yet we have an attack made. A brutal and remorseless attack made in the middle of the night. Discovery is made quickly, made with that rapidity which in criminal cases generally is found to be not accidental, but the premeditated intent. The attacker, or attackers, are manifestly disturbed before the completion of their work, whatever their ultimate intent may have been, and yet there is no possible sign of their escape, no clue, no disturbance of anything. No open door or window, no sound. Nothing whatever to show who had done the deed, or even that a deed has been done, except the victim and his surroundings incidental to the deed. The next night a similar attempt is made. though the house is full of wakeful people, and though there are on watch in the room and around it a detective officer, a trained nurse, an earnest friend, and the man's own daughter. The nurse is thrown into a catalepsy, and the watching friend, though protected by a respirator, into a deep sleep. Even the detective is so far overcome with some phase of stupor that he fires off his pistol in the sick room, and can't even tell what he thought he was firing at. That respirator of yours is the only thing that seems to have a bearing on the fact side of the affair. That you did not lose your head as the others did, the effect in such case being in proportion to the amount of time each remained in the room, points to the probability that the stupefying medium was not hypnotic, whatever else it may have been. But again, there is a fact which is contradictory. Miss Trelawney, who was in the room more than any of you, for she was in and out all the time and did her share of permanent watching also, did not seem to be affected at all. This would show that the influence, whatever it is, does not affect generally, unless, of course, it was that she was in some way inured to it. If it should turn out that it be some strange exhalation from some of those Egyptian curios, that might account for it. Only we are then face to face with the fact that Mr. Trelawney, who was most of all in the room, who, in fact, lived more than half his life in it, was affected worst of all. What kind of influence could it be in which would account for all these different and contradictory effects? No. The more I think of this form of the dilemma, the more I am bewildered. Why, even if it were that the physical attack on Mr. Trelawney had been made by someone residing in the house, and not within the sphere of suspicion, the oddness of the stupefyings would still remain a mystery. It is not easy to put anyone into catalepsy. Indeed, so far as it is known yet in science, there is no way to achieve such an object at will. The crux of the whole matter is Miss Trelawney, who seems to be subject to none of the influences, or possibly of the variants of the same influence at work. Through all, she goes unscathed, except that one slight semi-faint. It is most strange. I listened with a sinking heart, for though his manner was not illuminative of distrust, his argument was disturbing. Although it was not so direct as the suspicion of the detective, it seemed to single out Miss Trelawney as different from all others concerned, and in a mystery to be alone is to be suspected, ultimately if not immediately. I thought it better not to say anything. In such a case, silence is indeed golden. And if I said nothing now, I might have less to defend or explain or take back later. I was, therefore, secretly glad that his form of putting his argument did not require any answer from me, for the present, at all events. Dr. Winchester did not seem to expect any answer, a fact which, when I recognized it, gave me pleasure. I hardly knew why. He paused for a while, sitting with his chin in his hand, his eyes staring at vacancy, whilst his brows were fixed. His cigar was held limp between his fingers. He had apparently forgotten it. In an even voice, as though commencing exactly where he had left off, he resumed his argument. Doom scroll. These are long paragraphs, actually. I kind of like doom scrolling. And that's kind of what the doctor's doing, I guess. Yeah. He's doom scrolling. All he needs now is social media. The other horn of the dilemma is a different affair altogether. And if we once enter on it, we must leave everything in the shape of science and experience behind us. Or that you're staring at the phone while I read. Oh, you better be paying attention, Demos. There's a test after this. Right. The other horn of the dilemma. Cozy bed with phone. Yeah, Valana's like sitting on the couch, feet up. One of her cosplay projects in seat. Granted, I am lying on my belly with the cat on my back. That's deadly. Good luck. On the other horn of the dilemma is a different affair altogether, and if we once enter on it, we must leave everything in the shape of science and experience behind us. I confess that it has its fascinations for me, though at every new thought I find myself romancing in a way that makes me pull up suddenly and look facts resolutely in the face. I sometimes wonder whether the influence or emanation from the sick room at times affects me as it did the others. The detective, for instance. Of course, it may be that if it is anything chemical, any drug, for example, in vaporeal form, its effects may be cumulative. But then, what could there be that could produce such an effect? The room is, I know, full of mummy smell, and no wonder with so many relics from the tomb, let alone the actual mummy of that animal which Silvio attacked. By the way, I am going to test him tomorrow. I have been on the trace of a mummy cat and am to get possession of it in the morning. When I bring it here, we shall find out if it be a fact that racial instinct can survive a few thousand years in the grave. However, to get back to the subject in hand, these very mummy smells arise from the presence of substances and combinations of substances which the Egyptian priests, who were the learned men and scientists of their time, found by the experience of centuries to be strong enough to arrest the natural forces of decay. There must be powerful agencies at work to effect such a purpose, and it is possible that we may have here some rare substance or combination whose qualities and powers are not understood in this later and more prosaic age. I wonder if Mr. Trelawney has any knowledge or even suspicion of such a kind. I only know this for certain, that a worse atmosphere for a sick chamber could not possibly be imagined. And I admire the courage of Sir James Freary in refusing to have anything to do with the case under such conditions. These instructions of Mr. Trelawney to his daughter, and from what you have told me the care with which he has protected his wishes through his solicitor, show that he suspected something, at any rate. Indeed, it would almost seem as if he expected something to happen. I wonder if it would be possible to learn anything about that. Surely his papers would show or suggest something. It is a difficult matter to tackle, but it might have to be done. His present condition cannot go on forever, and if anything should happen, there would have to be an inquest. In such case, full examination would have to be made into everything. As it stands, the police evidence would show a murderous attack more than once repeated. As no clue is apparent, it would be necessary to seek one in Emotes. Dangerous words. He was silent. The last words seemed to come in a lower and lower tone as he went on. It had the effect of hopelessness. It came to me as a conviction that now was my time to find out if he had any definite suspicion. And as if in obedience to some command, I asked, "Do you suspect anyone?" He seemed, in a way, startled rather than surprised as he turned his eyes on me. Suspect anyone? Anything, you mean? I certainly suspect that there is some influence, but at present my suspicion is held within such limit. Later on, if there be any sufficient definite conclusion to my reasoning or my thinking, for there are not proper data for reasoning, I may suspect. At present, however... He stopped suddenly and looked at the door. There was a faint sound as the handle turned. My own heart seemed to stand still. There was over me some grim, vague apprehension. The interruption in the morning, when I was talking with the detective, came back upon me with a rush. The door opened, and Miss Trelawney entered the room. Very dramatic door opening. When she saw us, she started back, and a deep flush swept her face. She does that a lot too. For a few seconds she paused. At such a time, a few succeeding seconds seemed to lengthen in geometrical progression. It means nothing. The strain upon me, and, as I could easily see, on the doctor also, relaxed as she spoke. "Oh, forgive me. I did not know that you were engaged." It's like deja vu. "I was looking for you, Dr. Winchester, to ask you if I might go to bed tonight with safety, as you will be here. I feel so tired and worn out that I fear I may break down, and tonight I would certainly not be of any use." Dr. Winchester answered heartily, Do go to bed by all means and get a good night's sleep. God knows you want it. I am more than glad you have made the suggestion. I hate that word. It's not fair because I think I like that word too. It's my favorite spell in D&D. Suggestion. It was I milked that like crazy. Just ask Valena. For I fear when I saw you tonight that I might have you on my hands as a patient next. She gave a sigh of relief, and the tired look seemed to melt from her face. Never shall I forget the deep, earnest look in her great, beautiful black eyes as she said to me, "You will guard Father tonight, won't you, with Dr. Winchester?" No, he can't. There has to be a girl in there, too. I am so anxious about him that every second brings new fears. But I'm really worn out, and if I don't get a good sleep, I think I shall go mad. I will change my room for tonight. I am afraid that if I stay so close to Father's room, I shall multiply every sound into a new terror. But of course, you will have me wait if there be any cause. I shall be in the bedroom of the little suite next to the boudoir off the hall. I had those rooms when first I came to live with Father, and I had no care then. It will be easier to rest there, and perhaps for a few hours I may forget. I shall be all right in the morning. Good night. Good sleep would be nice? Yeah, good sleep is nice. Probably never get it. When I had closed the door behind her and come back to the little table at which we had been sitting, Dr. Winchester said, "That poor girl is overwrought to a terrible degree. I am delighted that she is to get a rest. It will be life to her, and in the morning she will be all right. Her nervous system is on the verge of a breakdown. Did you notice how fearfully disturbed she was, and how red she got when she came in and found us talking? An ordinary thing like that in her own house with her own guests wouldn't, under normal circumstances, disturb her. Because normally walking into a room with a couple men would make you blush? I don't know. I was about to tell him, as an explanation in her defense, how her entrance was a repetition of her finding the detective and myself alone together earlier in the day, when I remembered that conversation was so private that even an allusion to it might be awkward in evoking curiosity. So I remained silent. We stood up to go to the sick room, but as we took our way through the dimly lighted corridor, I could not help thinking, again and again and again, and for many a day after, how strange it was that she had interrupted me on 2 such occasions when touching on such a theme. There was certainly some strange web of accidents in whose meshes we were all involved. Chapter 7. The Traveler's Loss. That night everything went well. Knowing that Miss Trelawney herself was not on guard, Dr. Winchester and I doubled our vigilance. The nurses and Mrs. Grant kept watch, and the detectives made their visit each quarter of an hour. All night the patient remained in his trance. He looked healthy, and his chest rose and fell with the easy breathing of a child. But he never stirred. Only for his breathing he might have been of marble. Dr. Winchester and I wore our respirators, and irksome they were on that intolerably hot night. Between midnight and 3 o'clock I felt anxious, and had once more that creepy feeling to which these last few nights had accustomed me. But the grey of the dawn, stealing round the edges of the blinds, came with inexpressible relief, followed by restfulness, went through the household. During the hot night, my ears, strained to every sound, had been almost painfully troubled, as though my brain or sensoria were in anxious touch with them. Every breath of the nurse, or the rustle of her dress, every soft pat of slippered feet as the policeman went his rounds, every moment of watching life seemed to be a new impetus to guardianship. Something of the same feeling must have been abroad in the house. Now and again I could hear upstairs the sound of restless feet, and more than once downstairs the opening of a window. With the coming of the dawn, however, all this ceased, and the whole household seemed to rest. Dr. Winchester went home when Sister Doris came to relieve Mrs. Grant. He was, I think, a little disappointed or chagrined that nothing of an exceptional nature had happened during his long night vigil. Poor Dr. Winchester didn't get to see the supernatural. At 8 o'clock, Miss Trelawney joined us, and I was amazed as well as delighted to see how much good her night's sleep had done her. She was fairly radiant, just as I had seen her at our first meeting at the picnic. There was even a suggestion of color in her cheeks, which, however, looked startlingly white in contrast with her black brows and scarlet lips. With her restored strength, there seemed to have come a tenderness even exceeding that which she had first shown to her sick father. I could not but be moved by the loving touches as she fixed his pillows and brushed the hair from his forehead. I was wearied out myself, and with long spell of watching, and now that she was on guard, I started off to bed, blinking my tired eyes in the full light, and feeling the weariness of a sleepless night on me all at once. And I hiccuped too. I had a good sleep, and after lunch I was about to start out to walk to Jermyn Street, when I noticed an importune man at the hall door. The servant in charge was one called Morris, formerly the odd man, but since the exodus of the servants promoted to be butler pro tem. The stranger was speaking rather loudly, so that there was no difficulty in understanding his grievance. The servant man was respectful in both words and demeanor, but he stood squarely in front of the great double door so that the other could not enter. The first words which I heard from the visitor sufficiently explained the situation. "Oh, hello, Clou. Thank you for the lurk, buddy." "That's all very well, but I tell you I must see Mr. Trelawney. What is the use of your saying I can't when I tell you I must? You put me off and off and off. I came here at 9. You said then that he was not up, and that as he was not well, he could not be disturbed. I came at 12, and you told me again he was not up. I asked then to see any of his household. You told me that Miss Trelawney was not up. Now I come again at 3, and you tell me he is still in bed and is not awake yet. Where is Miss Trelawney? She is occupied and must not be disturbed. Well, she must be disturbed, or someone must. I am here about Mr. Trelawney's special business, and I have come from a place where servants always begin by saying no. No isn't good enough for me this time. I've had 3 years of it, waiting outside doors and tents when it took longer to get in than it did into the tombs. And then you would think, too, the men inside were as dead as the mummies. I've had about enough of it, I tell you, and when I come home and find the door of the man I've been working for barred in just the same way and with the same old answers, it stirs me up the wrong way. Did Mr. Trelawney leave orders that he would not see me when I should come?" Oh, that's good. paused and excitedly mopped his forehead. The servant answered very respectfully. I am very sorry, sir, if in doing my duty I have given offense, but I have my orders and must obey them. If you would like to leave any message, I will give it to Miss Trelawney, and if you will leave your address, she can communicate with you if she wishes. The answer came in such a way that it was easy to see that the speaker was a kind-hearted man and a just one. I don't know how you would tell that. My good fellow, I have no fault to find with you personally, and I am sorry if I have hurt your feelings. I must be just, and even if I am angry. But it is enough to anger any man to find himself in the position I am. Time is pressing. There is not an hour, not a minute to lose, and yet here I am, kicking my heels for 6 hours, knowing all the time that your master will be 100 times angrier than I am when he hears how the time has been fooled away. He would rather be walked out of 1,000 sleeps than not to see me just at present, and before it is too late. My God, it's simply dreadful after all I've gone through, to have my work spoiled at the last and be foiled in the very doorway by a stupid flunky. I'm glad he said flunky rather than a lot of other sort of more racist terms. As far as I know, flunky's not racist, it's just offensive. Is there no one with sense in the house, or with authority, even if he hasn't got sense? I could mighty soon convince him that your master must be awakened, even if he sleeps like the 7 sleepers. There was no mistaking the man's sincerity, or the urgency and importance of his business. From his point of view, at any rate, I stepped forward. Morris, I said, you had better tell Miss Trelawney that this gentleman wants to see her particularly. If she is busy, ask Mrs. Grant to tell her. Very good, sir, he answered in a tone of relief, and hurried away. The clue lurks, yes he does. Very lurky. I took the stranger into the little boudoir across the hall. As we went, he asked me, "Are you the secretary?" "No, I am a friend of Miss Trelawney's. My name is Ross." "Thank you very much, Mr. Ross, for your kindness," he said. "My name is Corbeck. I would give you my card, but they don't use cards where I come from, and if I had had any, I suppose they too would have gone last night." He stopped suddenly, as though conscious that he had said too much. We both remained silent. As we waited, I took stock of him. A short, sturdy man, brown as a coffee berry, possibly inclined to be fat, but now lean exceedingly. The deep wrinkles in his face and neck were not merely from time and exposure. There were those unmistakable signs where flesh or fat has fallen away, and the skin has become loose. The neck was simply an intricate surface of seams and wrinkles, and sun-scarred with the burning of the desert. The Far East, the tropic seasons, and the desert, which can have its color mark. But all three are quite different, and an eye which has once known can thenceforth easily distinguish them. The dusky pallor of one, the fierce red-brown of the other, and of the third, the dark, ingrained burning, as though it had become a permanent color. Mr. Corbeck had a big head, massive and full, with shaggy, dark red-brown hair but bald on the temples that are normally bald. His forehead was a fine one, high and broad, with, to use some terms of physiognomy which you don't have to, the frontal sinus boldly marked. The squareness of it showed, oh dear Lord, ratiocination. We're going to go with that. Ratiocination, and the fullness under the eyes, language. In quotes. I don't know why there are quotes around language. I do be lurking a bit. Long work day today. Oh, sorry about that, buddy. I hope you have a good, relaxing evening clue with more food than you should probably eat for a healthy boy. He had the short, broad nose that marks energy, the squared chin, marked despite a thick, unkempt beard and massive jaw that showed great resolution. Physiognomy is such a crazy thing that happened. It's hilarious. Peak relaxation vibes. Are you enjoying your lesson in physiognomy? Is everyone taking notes? There might be a test around physiognomy in like the next few years or something. It's very important subject matter. No bad man for the desert, I thought as I looked. Miss Trelawney came very quickly. When Mr. Corbeck saw her, he seemed somewhat surprised, but his annoyance and excitement had not disappeared. Quite enough remained to cover up any such secondary and purely exoteric feeling as surprise. You're taking so many notes. Yeah, I bet you are. Miss where are we? I said that part already. Esoteric. Yeah, he was not going to be surprised. But as she spoke, he never took his eyes off her, and I made a mental note that I would find some early opportunity of investigating the cause of his surprise. She began with an apology which quite smoothed down his ruffled feelings. Of course, had my father been well, you would not have been kept waiting. Indeed, had I not been on duty in the sick room when you called the first time, I should have seen you at once. Now you will kindly tell me what is the matter which so presses. He looked at me and hesitated. She spoke at once. You may say before Mr. Ross anything which you can tell me. He has my fullest confidence as being a friend I've seen 3 times in my entire life and is helping me in my trouble. I do not think you quite understand how serious my father's condition is. For 3 days he has not waked or given any sign of consciousness, and I am in terrible trouble about him. Unhappily, I am in great ignorance of my father and his life. I only came to live with him a year ago, and I know nothing whatever of his affairs. I do not even know who you are, or in what way your business is associated with him. She said this with a little deprecating smile, all conventional and altogether graceful, as though to express in the most genuine way her absurd ignorance. He looked steadily at her for perhaps a quarter of a minute. Then he spoke, beginning at once as though his mind were made up and his confidence established. My name is Eugene Corbeck. I am a Master of Arts and Doctor of Laws and Master of Surgery of Cambridge, Doctor of Letters of Oxford, Doctor of Science and Doctor of Languages of London University, Doctor of Philosophy of Berlin, Doctor of Oriental Languages of Paris. I have some other degrees, honorary and otherwise, but I need not trouble you with them. In fact, you need not have troubled us with the first list, but there's a very impressive list. Those I have named will show you that I am sufficiently feathered with diplomas to fly into even a sick room. Early in life, fortunately for my interests and pleasures, but unfortunately for my pocket, I fell in with Egyptology. I must have been bitten by some powerful scarab, for I took it bad. I went out tomb hunting and managed to get a living of a sort, and to learn, a living of a sort, i.e., I stole a lot of Egyptian artifacts and sold them to museums. Those things should be in a museum, apparently. Famous movie. I went out tomb hunting and managed to get a living of a sort, and to learn some things that you can't get out of books, because, then write the books, problem solved. I was in pretty low water when I met your father, who was doing some explorations on his own account, and since then I haven't found that I have many unsatisfied wants. He is a real patron of the arts, and no mad Egyptologist can ever hope for a better chief. He spoke with feeling, and I was glad to see that Miss Trelawney colored up with pleasure at the praise of her father. I could not help noticing, however, that Mr. Corbeck was, in a measure, speaking as if against time. I took it that he wished, while speaking, to study his ground, to see how far he would be justified in taking into confidence the two strangers before him. As he went on, I could see that his confidence kept increasing. When I thought of it afterward and remembered what he had said, I realized that the measure of the information which he gave us marked his growing trust. I have been several times out on expeditions in Egypt for your father, and I have always found it a delight to work for him. Many of his treasures, and he has some rare ones, I tell you, he has procured through me, either by my exploration or by purchase or otherwise. Your father, Mr. Lottie, has a rare knowledge. He sometimes makes up his mind that he wants to find a particular thing, of whose existence, if it still exists, he has become aware, and he will follow it all over the world till he gets it. I've been on just such a chase now. He stopped suddenly, as suddenly as though his mouth had been shut by the jerk of a string. We waited. When he went on, he spoke with a caution that was new to him, as though he wished to forestall our asking any questions. I am not at liberty to mention anything of my mission, where it was to, what it was for, or anything at all about it. Such matters are in confidence between Miss Trelawney and myself. I am pledged to absolute secrecy. Then why are you here? He paused, and an embarrassed look crept over his face. Suddenly he said, Are you sure, Miss Trelawney? Your father is not well enough to see me today. A look of wonderment was on her face in turn, but it cleared at once. She stood up, saying in a tone in which dignity and graciousness were blended, I need money. Me too. Come and see for yourself. She moved toward her father's room. He followed, and I brought up the rear. Or found the thing, yeah. Mr. Corbeck entered the sick room as though he knew it. There is an unconscious attitude or bearing to persons in new surroundings which there is no mistaking. Even in his anxiety to see his powerful friend, he glanced for a moment round the room as at a familiar place. Then all his attention became fixed on the bed. I watched him narrowly, for somehow I felt that on this man depended much of our enlightenment regarding the strange matter in which we were involved. It was not what I doubted him. It was not that I doubted him. The man was of transparent honesty. It was his very quality which we had to dread. He was of that courageous, fixed trueness to his undertaking that if he should deem it his duty to guard a secret, he would do it to the last. The case before us was, at least, an unusual one, and it would consequently require more liberal recognition of bounds of the duty of secrecy than would hold under ordinary conditions. Thank you for the follow. I hope you're enjoying yourself. To us, ignorance was helplessness. If we could learn anything of the past, we might at least form some idea of the conditions antecedent to the attack. I wanted to say anecdote, but that's just no, it's incident, and might so achieve some means of helping the patient to recovery. There were curios which might be removed. My thoughts were beginning to whirl once again. I pulled myself up sharply and watched. There was a look of infinite pity on the sun-stained, rugged face as he gazed at his friend lying so helpless. The sternness of Mr. Trelawney's face had not relaxed in sleep, but somehow it made the helplessness more marked. It would not have troubled one to see a weak or an ordinary face under such conditions, but this purposeful, masterful man, lying before us wrapped in impenetrable sleep, had all the pathos of a great ruin. The sight was not a new one to us, but I could see that Miss Trelawney, like myself, was moved afresh by it in the presence of the stranger. Mr. Corbeck's face grew stern. All the pity died away, and in its stead came a grim, hard look which boded ill for whoever had been the cause of this mighty downfall. This look in turn gave place to one of decision. The volcanic energy of the man was working to some definite purpose. He glanced around us, and as his eyes lighted on Nurse Kennedy, his eyebrows went up a trifle. She noted the look, and glanced interrogatively at Miss Trelawney, who flashed back a reply with a glance. She went quietly from the room, closing the door behind her. Mr. Corbeck looked first at me, with a strong man's natural impulse to learn from a man rather than a woman. Lovely. Then Miss Trelawney, with a remembrance of the duty of courtesy, and said, antecedent. Yeah, not a word I'm gonna adopt in my normal vocabulary, I don't think. Tell me all about it. How did it begin, and when? Miss Trelawney looked at me appealingly, and forthwith I told him all that I knew. He seemed to make no motion during the whole time, but insensibly the bronze face became steel. When, at the end, I told him of Mr. Marvin's visit, and of the power of attorney, his look began to brighten, and when, seeing his interest in the matter, I went more into detail as to its terms, he spoke. Good. Now I know where my duty lies. With a sinking heart, I heard him. Such a phrase, coming at such a time, seemed to close the door to my hopes of enlightenment. What do you mean? I asked, feeling that my question was a feeble one. His answer emphasized my fears. Trelawney knows what he is doing. He had some definite purpose in all that he did, and we must not thwart him. He evidently expected something to happen and guarded himself at all points. Not all points, I said impulsively. There must have been a weak spot somewhere, or he wouldn't be lying here like that. Somehow his impassiveness surprised me. I had expected that he would find a valid argument to my phrase, but it did not move him. At least, At least not in the way I thought. Something like a smile flickered over his swarthy face as he answered me. This is not the end. Trelawney did not guard himself to no purpose. Doubtless, he expected this too, or at any rate, the possibility of it. Do you know what he expected, or from what source? The questioner was Miss Trelawney. The answer came at once. No. I know nothing of either. I can guess. He stopped suddenly. Guess what? The suppressed excitement in the girl's voice was akin to anguish. The steely look came over the swarthy face again, but there was tenderness and courtesy in both voice and manner as he replied, Believe me, I would do anything I honestly could to relieve your anxiety, but in this I have a higher duty. What duty? Silence. As he spoke the word, the strong mouth closed like a steel trap. We all remained silent for a few minutes. In the intensity of our thinking, the silence became a positive thing. The small sounds of life within and without the house seemed intrusive. The first to break it was Miss Trelawney. I had seen an idea, a hope, flash in her eyes, but she steadied herself before speaking. What was the urgent subject on which you wanted to see me, knowing that my father was not available? The pause showed her mastery of her thoughts. The instantaneous change in Mr. Corbeck was almost ludicrous. His start of surprise coming close upon his ironclad impassiveness was like a pantomimic change. But all idea of comedy was swept away by the tragic earnestness with which he remembered his original purpose. My God, he said, as Twitch ads come upon us. We'll have to wait there for the ads to complete before we find out Mr. Corbeck's, at least one of his reasons for being here. 3 minutes. We'll be back. Stretch your limbs. Do you know, welcome back from ads, everybody. Oreos seem to be a little fragile. We've been buying a bunch of different Oreos. There's a whole bunch at the store. They all seem to crack pretty easily. Don't make them like they used to, I guess. Not that I remember how they used to make them. Yes. My God, he said, as he raised his hand from the chair back on which it rested, and beat it down with a violence which would in itself have arrested attention. His brows corrugated as he went on. I quite forgot what a loss. Now, of all times, just at the moment of success. He, lying there helpless, and my tongue tied, not able to raise hand or foot in my ignorance of his wishes. Hello, Gwen. You may not have heard that, but I got a chirp chirp as she came in the door. Kittens have just been fed. That is normally the danger time during a stream. What is it? Oh, do tell us. I am so anxious about my dear father. Is it any new trouble? I hope not. Oh, I hope not. I've had such anxiety and trouble already. It alarms me afresh to hear you speak so. Won't you tell me something to allay this terrible anxiety and uncertainty? He drew his sturdy form up to its full height as he said, Alas, I may not tell you anything. It is his secret. He pointed to the bed. And yet I came here for his advice, his counsel, his assistance. And he lies there helpless. And time is flying by us. It may soon be too late. Yeah, he stole something. He needs to sell it off. What is it? What is it? Broke in Miss Trelawney in a sort of passion of anxiety, her face drawn with pain. Oh, speak, say something. This anxiety and horror and mystery are killing me. Mr. Corbeck calmed himself by a great effort. I may not tell you the details. I may not tell you details, but I have had a great loss. My mission, in which I have spent 3 years, was successful. I discovered all that I sought and more, and brought them home with me safely. Treasures, priceless in themselves, but doubly precious to him by whose wishes and instructions I sought them. I arrived in London only last night, and when I woke this morning my precious charge was stolen. Stolen in some mysterious way. Not a soul in London knew that I was arriving. No one but myself knew what was in the shabby portmanteau that I carried. My room had but one door, and that I locked and bolted. The room was high in the house, 5 stories up, so that no entrance could have been obtained by the window. Indeed, I had closed this window myself and shut the hasp, for I wished to be secure in every way. This morning the hasp was untouched, and yet my portmanteau was gone. The lamps were gone. There, it is out. I went to Egypt to search for a set of unique lamps which Mr. Trelawney wished to trace. With incredible labor and through many dangers I followed him. I brought them safe home, and now... He turned away, much moved. Even his iron nature was breaking down under the sense of loss. Miss Trelawney stepped over and laid her hand on his arm. I looked at her in amazement. All the passion and pain which had so moved her seemed to have taken the form of resolution. Her form was erect, her eyes blazed. Energy was manifest in every nerve and fiber of her being. Even her voice was full of nervous power as she spoke. It was apparent that she was a marvelously strong woman, and that her strength could answer when called upon. Except every emergency up to this point. Just casually, you know what? Not gonna rise to the occasion. But when lamps have been stolen. Ugh, my chair. Yes, I see you. must act at once. My father's wishes must be carried out if it is possible. Hello, Gwen. No, hang on. She loves braided cords, and there's new braided cords on the desk. Gwen. Yeah. She's only there to eat your cables. She really is. There's so many cables right now. You can't have those, baby. Those are mine. Yeah. Come here. Come here, baby. There you go. Hi. You're so cute. You're so cute and adorable. Here. You sit here, okay? You can sit there. Can you hear you purring through my headset? And butting my microphone with your head. It doesn't work that way, baby. Here, go over there. Careful. Oh, baby. All the kitty cats are in here now. Alright. Sorry. Anyways, where were we? We must act at once. My father's wishes must be carried out if it is possible to us. Mr. Ross, you are a lawyer. We have actually in the house a man whom you consider one of the best detectives in London. Surely we can do something. We can begin at once. Mr. Corbeck took new life from her enthusiasm. Yeah, because you can just randomly assign detectives as you please, apparently. Good. You are your father's daughter, was all he said. But his admiration for her energy was manifest by the impulsive way in which he took her hand. I moved over to the door and was going to bring Sergeant Daw, and from her look of approval, I knew that Margaret, Miss Trelawney, understood. I was at the door when Mr. Corbeck called me back. One moment, he said. Before we bring a stranger on the scene, it must be borne in mind that he is not to know what you know now. That the lamps were the objects of a prolonged and difficult and dangerous search. All I can tell him, all that he must know from any source, is that some of my property has been stolen. You notice how, there are secrets from everybody except Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross and I guess not even Miss Trelawney. Another person on the scene. Yeah, another person on the scene. And secrets. They all have their own secrets, and you must tell no one. You must tell no one, but I will trust you, Mr. Ross. You're the friend of this girl I don't know. I must describe some of the lamps, especially one, for it is of gold, and my fear is lest the thief, ignorant of its historic worth, may, in order to cover up his crime, have it melted. I would willingly pay 10, 20, 100, 1,000 times its intrinsic value rather than have it destroyed. I shall tell him only what is necessary. So please, let me answer any questions he may ask, unless, of course, I ask you or refer to either of you for the answer. We both nodded acquiescence. Then a thought struck me, and I said, yeah, protag powers, yeah. And I said, by the way, if it be necessary to keep this matter quiet, will it be better to have it, if possible, a private job for the detective? If once a thing gets to Scotland Yard, it is out of our power to keep it quiet, and further secrecy may be impossible. I shall sound Sergeant Daw before he comes up. If I say nothing, it will mean that he accepts the task and will deal with it privately. Mr. Corbeck answered at once. Secrecy is everything. The one thing I dread is that the lamps, or some of them, may be destroyed at once. To my intense astonishment, Miss Trelawney spoke out at once, but quietly, in a decided voice. They will not be destroyed, nor any of them. Mr. Corbeck actually smiled in amazement. How on earth do you know? He asked. Her answer was still more incomprehensible. I don't know how I know it, but know it I do. I feel it all through me, as though it were a conviction which has been with me all my life. That's suspicious as fuck. Who's watched The Mummy, like the movie? Chapter 8, The Finding of the Lamps. Which one? Good question. Yes. I mean, the only good one, honestly. Sergeant Daw at first made some demur, but finally agreed. So what I mean by the good one is, I don't know how to tell you what the good one is. Yeah, thank you, Brendan Fraser. Yeah, the first one that Brendan Fraser was in. I'm not a fan of the follow-up ones. Although the first one he was in, that was cinema. That was good cinema. Sergeant Daw at first made some demur, but finally agreed to advise privately on a matter which might be suggested to him. Not the Tom Cruise one. Look, I hate Tom Cruise. I will say this. He's a good actor. I don't like saying that because I don't like Tom Cruise. But Tom Cruise is actually a good actor from what I've seen. He added that I was to remember that he only undertook to advise, for if action were required, he might have to refer the matter to headquarters. With this understanding, I left him in the study and brought Miss Trelawney and Mr. Corbeck to him. Nurse Kennedy resumed her place at the bedside before we left the room. I could not but admire the cautious, cool-headed precision with which the traveler stated his case. He did not seem to conceal anything, and yet he gave the least possible description of the objects missing. He did not enlarge on the mystery of the case. He seemed to look on it as an ordinary hotel theft, knowing as I did that his one object was to recover the articles before their identity could be obliterated. I could see the rare intellectual skill with which he gave the necessary matter and held back all else, though without seeming to do so. Truly, thought I, this man has learned the lesson of the Eastern bazaars, and with Western intellect has improved upon his masters. He quite conveyed his idea to the detective, who, after thinking the matter over for a few moments, said, I love that arrogance. You've learned the lessons of the Eastern bazaar, but you're cooler because you have Western intellect. You're superior. Good old colonizer mentality. Okay, so the detective speaks. Pot or scale? That is the question. When we first moved... Yeah, exactly, Deimos. That's the good one. Pot or scale? That is the question. What does that mean? Asked the other, keenly alert. An old thief's phrase from Birmingham. Though that in these days of slang everyone knew that. In old times at Brum, which I had a lot of small metal industries, the gold and silversmiths used to buy metal from almost anyone who came along. And as metal in small quantities could generally be had cheap when they didn't ask where it came from, it got to be accustomed to ask only one thing, whether the customer wanted the goods melted, in which case the buyer made the price, and the melting pot was always on the fire. If it was to be preserved in its present state, at the buyer's option, it went into the scale and fetched a standard price for old metal. There's a good deal of such work done still, and in other places than Brum, when we're looking for stolen watches, we often come across the works. It's not possible to identify wheels and springs out of a heap, but it's not often that we come across cases that are wanted. Now, in the present instance, much will depend on whether the thief is a good man, and that's what they call a man who knows his work. A first-class crook will know whether a thing is of more value than merely the metal in it. And in such a case, he would put with it someone who could place it later on. In America or France, perhaps. By the way, do you think anyone but yourself could identify the lamps? No one but myself. Are there others like them? Not that I know of, answered Mr. Corbeck. though there may be others that resemble them in many particulars. The detective paused before asking again. Would any other skilled person at the British Museum, for instance, or a dealer or a collector like Mr. Trelawney know the value, the artistic value of the lamps? Certainly. Anyone with a head on his shoulders would see at a glance that the things were valuable. The detective's face brightened. Then there is a chance. If your door was locked and the window shut, the goods were not stolen by the chance of a chambermaid or a boots coming along. Whoever did the job went after it special, and he ain't going to part with his swag without his price. It says you also like the second one, but that might be because you find Ardeth sexy. Yeah, whoever Ardeth is. Damn it, where was I? Chambermaid. Right, swag without his price. Here we go. The dark hair Magi. Oh, the guy. Okay. Yep. I think I understand. This must be a case of notice to the pawnbrokers. There's one good thing about it, however, anyhow, and that the hue and cry needn't be given. We needn't tell Scotland Yard unless you like. We can work the thing privately, if you wish to keep the thing dark. As you told me at the first, that is our chance. Mr. Corbeck, after a pause, said quietly, I suppose you couldn't hazard a suggestion as to how the robbery was effected. The policeman smiled, the smile of knowledge and experience. In a very simple way, I have no doubt, sir. That is how all these mysterious crimes turn out in the long run. The criminal knows his work and all the tricks of it, and he is always on the watch for chances. Moreover, he knows by experience what these chances are likely to be and how they usually come. The other person is only careful. He doesn't know all the tricks and pits that may be made for him, and by some little oversight or other he falls into the trap. When we know all about this case, you will wonder that you did not see the method of it all along. This seemed to annoy Mr. Corbeck a little. There was decided heat in his manner as he answered. Look here, my good friend. There is not anything simple about this case, except that the things were taken. The window was closed, the fireplace was bricked up. There is only one door to the room, and that I locked and bolted. There is no transom. I have heard all about hotel robberies through the transom. I never left my room in the night. I looked at the things before going to bed, and I went to look at them again when I woke up. If you can rig up any kind of simple robbery out of these facts, you are a clever man, and that's all I say. Clever enough to go right away and get my things back. Miss Trelawney laid her hand upon his arm in a soothing way and said quietly, Do not distress yourself unnecessarily. I am sure they will turn up. Sergeant Daw turned to her so quickly that I could not help remembering vividly his suspicions of her, already formed, as he said, May I ask, miss, on what do you base that opinion? I dreaded to hear her answer, given to ears already awake to suspicion, but it came to me as a new pain or shock all the same. I cannot tell you how I know, but I am sure of it. The detective looked at her for some seconds in silence, and then threw a quick glance at me. Presently, he had a little more conversation with Mr. Corbeck as to his own movements, the details of the hotel and the room, and the means of identifying the goods. Then he went away to commence his inquiries, Mr. Corbeck impressing on him the necessity for secrecy, lest the thief should get wind of his danger and destroy the lamps. Mr. Corbeck promised, when going away, to attend to various matters of his home business. He returned early in the evening to stay in the house. All that day, Miss Trelawney was in better spirits and looked in better strength than she had yet been, despite the new shock and annoyance of the theft, which must ultimately bring so much disappointment to her father. We spent most of the day looking over the curio treasures of Mr. Trelawney. From what I had heard from Mr. Corbick, I began to have some idea of the vastness of his enterprise in the world of Egyptian research. And with this light, everything around me began to have a new interest. As I went on, the interest grew. Any lingering doubts which I might have had changed to wonder and admiration. The house seemed to be a veritable storehouse of marvels of antique art. In addition to the curios, big and little, in Mr. Trelawney's own room, from the great sarcophagi down to the scarabs of all kinds in the cabinets, the great hall, the staircase landings, the study, and even the boudoir were full of antique pieces, which would have made a collector's mouth water. Miss Trelawney from the first came with me, and looked with growing interest at everything. After having examined some cabinets of exquisite amulets, she said to me, in a quite naive way, "You will hardly believe that I have of late seldom even looked at any of these things. It is only since father has been ill that I seem to have even any curiosity about them. But now, they grow and grow on me to quite an absorbing degree. I wonder if it is that the collector's blood which I have in my veins is beginning to manifest itself. If so, the strange thing is that I have not felt the call of it before. Of course, I know most of the big things, and have examined them more or less, but really in a sort of way I have always taken them for granted, as though they had always been there. I have noticed the same thing now and again with family pictures, and the way they are taken for granted by the family. If you will let me examine them with you, it will be delightful." It was a joy to me to hear her talk in such a way, and her last suggestion quite thrilled me. Together we went round the various rooms and passages, examining and admiring the magnificent curios. There was such a bewildering amount and variety of objects that we could only glance at most of them. But as we went along and arranged that which we should take it, we arranged that we should take them seriatim, day by day, I guess, step by step, day by day, and examine them more closely. In the hall was a sort of big frame of floriated steelwork, which Margaret said her father used for lifting the heavy stone lids of the sarcophagi. It was not heavy and could be moved about easily enough. By aid of this, we raised the covers in turn and looked at the endless series of hieroglyphic pictures cut in most of them. In spite of her profession of ignorance, Margaret knew a good deal about them. Her year of life with her father had unconsciously its daily and hourly lesson. She was a remarkably clever and acute-minded girl, and with a prodigious memory, so that her store of knowledge, gathered unthinkingly bit by bit, had grown to proportions that many a scholar might have envied. Except that's not how that works. And yet it was all so, well, maybe that is how it works. And yet it was all so naive and unconscious, so girlish and simple. That doesn't make sense. She was so fresh in her views and ideas, and had so little thought of self, that in her companionship I forgot for the time all the troubles and mysteries which enmeshed the house, and I felt like a boy again. The most interesting of the sarcophagi were undoubtedly the three in Mr. Trelawney's room. Every so often, I think the activity feed changes, like something that happened a minute ago happens 10 minutes ago, and then like things twitch and flicker and move. It's a tad distracting. Okay, let's see if that even helps at all. All right. Where are we? Oh, yes. The most interesting of the sarcophagi were undoubtedly the three in Mr. Trelawney's room. Of these, two were of dark stone, one porphyry. Oh, the top of the mod chat's doing crazy things too. One of porphyry. Let's go for porphyry, and the other of a sort of ironstone. These were wrought with some hieroglyphs, but the third was strikingly different. It was of some yellow-brown substance of the dominating color effect of Mexican onyx, which it resembled in many ways, excepting that the natural pattern of its convolutions was less marked. Here and there were patches almost transparent, certainly translucent. The whole chest, cover and all, was wrought with hundreds, perhaps thousands of minute hieroglyphics, seemingly in an endless series. Back, front, sides, edges, bottom, all had their quota of the dainty pictures, the deep blue of their coloring showing up freshly and sharply edged in the yellow stone. It was very long, nearly 9 feet and perhaps a yard wide. The sides undulated so that there was no hard line. Even the corners took such excellent curves that they pleased the eye. Truly, I said, this must have been made for a giant. Or for a giantess, said Margaret. This sarcophagus stood near to one of the windows. It was, in one respect, different from all the other sarcophagi in the place. All the others in the house, of whatever material, granite, porphyry, ironstone, basalt, slate, or wood, were quite simple in form within. Some of them were plain of interior surface, others were engraved in whole or part with hieroglyphics, but each and all of them had no protuberances or uneven surface anywhere. They might have been used for baths. Indeed, they resembled in many ways Roman baths of stone or marble which I had seen. Inside this, however, was a raised space, outlined like a human figure. I asked Margaret if she could explain it in any way. For answer, she said this: Father never wished to speak about this. It attracted my attention from the first, but when I asked him about it, he said, I shall tell you all about it someday, little girl, if I live. But not yet. The story is not yet told, as I hope to tell it to you. Someday, perhaps soon, I shall know all, and then we shall go over it together, and a mighty interesting story you will find it, from first to last. Once afterward, I said, rather lightly, I am afraid, is that story of the sarcophagus told yet, Father? He shook his head and looked at me gravely as he said, Not yet, little girl, but it will be, if I live. If I live. His repeating that phrase about his living rather frightened me. I never ventured to ask him again. Somehow this thrilled me. I could not exactly say how or why, but it seemed like a gleam of light at last. There are, I think, moments when the mind accepts something as true, though it can account for neither the course of the thought nor, if there be more than one thought, the connection between them. Hitherto, we had been in such outer darkness regarding Mr. Trelawney and the strange visitation which had fallen on him, that anything which afforded a clue, even the faintest and most shadowy kind, had at the outset the enlightening satisfaction of a certainty. Here were two lights of our puzzle. The first, that Mr. Trelawney associated with this particular curio a doubt of his own living. The second, that he had some purpose or expectation with regard to it, which he would not disclose, even to his daughter, till complete. Again, it was to be borne in mind that this sarcophagus differed internally from all the others. What meant that odd raised place? I said nothing to Miss Trelawney, for I feared lest I should either frighten her or buoy her up with future hopes. but I made up my mind that I would take an early opportunity for further investigation. Close beside the sarcophagus was a low table of green stone with red veins in it, like bloodstone. The feet were fashioned like the paws of a jackal, and round each leg was twined a full-throated snake wrought exquisitely in pure gold. On it rested a strange and very beautiful coffer or casket of stone in a peculiar shape. It was something like a small coffin, except that the longer sides, instead of being cut off square like the upper or level part, were continued to a point. Thus it was an irregular septahedron, there being 2 planes on each of the 2 sides. One end and a top and bottom. The stone of one piece, which it was wrought, was such that I had never seen before. At the base it was of a full green, the color of emerald, without, of course, its gleam. It was not by any means dull, however, either in color or substance. It was of infinite hardness and fineness of texture. The surface was almost that of a jewel. The color grew lighter as it rose, with gradations so fine as to be imperceptible, changing to a fine yellow almost of the color of Mandarin china. It was quite unlike anything I had ever seen, and did not resemble any stone or gem that I knew. I took it to be some unique motherstone or matrix of some gem. It was wrought all over, except in a few spots, with fine hieroglyphics exquisitely done and colored with the same blue-green cement or pigment that appeared on the sarcophagus. In length it was about 2 feet and a half, in breadth about half this, and was nearly a foot high. The vacant spaces were irregularly distributed about the top, running to the pointed end. These places seemed less opaque than the rest of the stone. I tried to lift up the lid so that I might see if it were translucent, but it was securely fixed. It fitted so exactly. It fitted so exactly that the whole coffer seemed like a single piece of stone, mysteriously hollowed from within. On the sides and edges were some odd-looking protuberances, wrought just as finely as any other portion of the coffer, which had been sculptured by manifest design in the cutting of the stone. They had queer shaped holes or hollows, different in each, and like the rest were covered with hieroglyphic figures, cut finely and filled in with the same blue-green cement. Oh, I caught that. Hello, Queen. Yes, I hydrate. Thank you for the drink. On the other side of the great sarcophagus stood another small table of alabaster, exquisitely chased with symbolic figures of gods and the signs of the zodiac. On this table stood a case of about a foot square, composed of slabs of rock crystal, set in a skeleton of bands of red gold, beautifully engraved with hieroglyphics and colored with a blue-green, very much the tint of the figures of the sarcophagus and the coffer. The whole work was quite modern. For something that was made thousands of years ago, yes, very modern. Or maybe I'm being too much of a smartass, but if the case was modern, what it held was not. Within, on a cushion of cloth and gold as fine as silk, and with the peculiar softness of old gold, rested a mummy hand, so perfect that it startled one to see it. A woman's hand, fine and long, with slim tapering fingers, and nearly as perfect as when it was given to the embalmer thousands of years before. In the embalming, it had lost nothing of its beautiful shape. Even the wrist seemed to maintain its pliability, as the gentle curve lay on the cushion. The skin was of a rich, creamy, or old ivory color, untouched by decay. a dusky fair skin which suggested heat, but heat in shadow. The great peculiarity of it as a hand was that it had in all 7 fingers, there being 2 middle and 2 index fingers. The upper end of the wrist was jagged, as though it had been broken off, and was stained with a red-brown stain. On the cushion near the hand was a small scarab, exquisitely wrought of emerald. 7 fingers, huh? See, I have not read this story before, so I am ignorant of the peculiars, but if this hand has 7 fingers, perhaps it's the Jewel of 7 Stars, is what I'm thinking. Very suspicious. That is another of Father's mysteries. When I asked him about it, he said that it was perhaps the most valuable thing he had, except one. Thank you for the head pat, Lily. When I asked him what that one was, he refused to tell me, and forbade me to ask him anything concerning it. I will tell you, he said, all about it too in good time, if I live. Always that little caveat. I can only talk to you if I'm alive. Nonsense. If I live, the phrase again. These 3 things grouped together, the sarcophagus, the coffer, and the hand seemed to make a trilogy of mystery indeed. At this time, Miss Trelawney was sent for on some domestic matter. I looked at the other curios in the room, but they did not seem to have anything like the same charm for me. Now that she was away, later on in the day, I was sent for to the boudoir where she was consulting with Mrs. Grant as to the lodgment of Mr. Corbeck. They were in doubt as to whether he should have a room close to Mr. Trelawney's or quite away from it. That's right. The hydration is trying to, assert itself. And had thought it well to ask my advice on the subject. I came to the conclusion that he had better not be too near, for the first, at all events, he could easily be moved closer if necessary. When Mrs. Grant had gone, I asked Miss Trelawney how it came that the furniture of this room, the boudoir in which we were, was so different from the other rooms of the house. Father's forethought, she answered. When I first came, he thought, and rightly enough, that I might get frightened with so many records of death and the tomb everywhere. So he had this room, and the little suite off of it. That door opens into the sitting room where I slept last night, furnished with pretty things. You see, they are all beautiful. That cabinet belonged to the great Napoleon. God, these guys are, rich? A little bit. Very British. I stole all the things that are valuable to all the other people of the world, and I put them in my sleeping room. Makes sense. There's nothing Egyptian in these rooms at all, then? I asked, rather to show interest in what she had said than anything else, for the furnishing of the room was apparent. What a lovely cabinet. May I look at it? Of course, with the greatest of pleasure, she answered with a smile. Its finishing with and without, Father says, is absolutely complete. I stepped over and looked at it closely. It was made of tulip wood, inlaid in patterns, and was mounted in ormolu. In ormolu. Ormolu. I pulled open one of the drawers, a deep one where I could see the work to great advantage. As I pulled it, something rattled inside as though rolling, and there was a tinkle as of metal on metal. Is it kind of smart to go into a girl's room and say, just open a drawer? Possibly not something, it's not her actual room, so I guess, but still, you'd be like, hey, is it okay to open this drawer? Did you leave some, I could change of clothes here last night or something I should know about? Hello, I said. There is something in here. Perhaps I had better not open it. There's nothing that I know of, she answered. Some of the housemaids may have used it to put something by for the time and forgotten it. Open it by all means. I pulled open the drawer. As I did so, both Miss Trelawney and I started back in amazement. There, before our eyes, lay a number of ancient Egyptian lamps, of various sizes and strangely varied shapes. We leaned over them and looked closely. My own heart was beating like a trip hammer, and I could see by the heaving of Margaret's bosom that she was strangely excited. Whilst we looked, afraid to touch and almost afraid to think, there was a ring at the front door. Immediately afterwards, Mr. Corbeck, followed by Sergeant Dog, came into the hall. The door of the boudoir was open, and when they saw us, Mr. Corbeck came running in, followed more slowly by the detective. There was a sort of chastened joy in his face and manner as he said impulsively, "Rejoice with me, my dear Miss Trelawney. My luggage has come and all my things are intact." And his face fell as he added, "Except the lamps. The lamps that were worth all the rest 1,000 times. He stopped, struck by the strange pallor of her face, and his eyes, following her look and mine, lit on the cluster of lamps in the drawer. He gave a sort of cry of surprise and joy as he bent over and touched them. My lamps! My lamps! Then they are safe, safe, safe! But how? In the name of God, of all the gods, how did they come here? We all stood silent. The detective made a deep sound of intaking breath. I looked at him, and as he caught my glance, he turned his eyes on Miss Trelawney, whose back was toward him. There was in them the same look of suspicion which had been there when he had spoken to me of her being the first to find her father on the occasions of the attacks. We're going to stop there, I think. It's 9:37 and these chapters go on a little while. So next time we will begin with chapter 9 of N chapters. Yes. N number of chapters. 3. Chapter 9. That's right. Yeah, so we had 500 extra characters come in, say things like, "I'm really cool and I want to help you as much as I can, but I can't help you. But don't remember that I said I could help you because I'm really cool." A bunch of worthless characters. And then we had Mr. Corbeck show up with a real mystery. Oh, hello, bunny. Thank you for the headpad. I am sitting upright. I'll do that again. Yes. I should get rid of sit upright. I feel guilty whenever it's 10 points. Who gives a crap? And then there was a mummy cat mentioned. Yeah, so there's this suggestion that the mummy cat probably has 7 fingers, just like Silvio, are the house kitty cat. But the house kitty cat can possibly not be anywhere near where people are getting scratched, but is angry at the mummified cat. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. So there's a mummy cat mentioned, but not in their recent exploration of all the mummies and stuff in the last paragraph, if you notice that. So I suspect they're dodging that in some sort of attempt to surprise us with it later on. This is my theory. Then we have the hand of a woman, perfectly preserved over the last several thousand years, with 7 fingers. That's kind of wild. Imagine opening up a box and seeing that. We'll give you dreams for a little while. So we have these lamps impossibly removed from Mr. Corbeck's room and transported mysteriously to Margaret's old room somehow, in probably one of the most pointless demonstrations of sort of mystical. I guess it's emphasizing the mystery around what's happening, but it sounds like Mr. Corbeck was just going to bring them here. Why would you do that? You're kind of giving away, you're kind of giving the show away that way, right? Kind of, you don't want to do that if you're trying to be all secrety and sneaky and stuff. So it remains a grand mystery. This is the truth. This is for sure. But with that, we will find, I think, someone to pass along the crowd to. Let's see. Whom do we have? Are we following anyone who does reading things? Not that person, not that person. Oh, wow. She's still streaming. That's great. Oh, thank you for attending, Deimos. Always a delight to have someone commenting here and there now and then in chat. It's a nice feeling to see that, you know, there be a person out there somewhere paying attention. Okay. Someone's doing a subathon. I don't know exactly what they're doing though. There's a writing. A lot of people do writing streams. Reading Dragon Rider? That's okay. That's librarian or pet dragons. Who doesn't like pet dragons? What is this person doing? She's playing a game. Okay. No, I don't know. I moved past that one, but I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that. There's always our Dracula girl. Is this really like only one page? Like, it can't be like one page of people doing things, right? This is kind of wild. Kind of wild. We could, did we ever raid Dad by Day? We did already that. Yeah, I think so, yeah. Why don't we do this? No, her energy is way too high. We haven't? I thought we did. Mind you, he's playing Dead by Daylight. Yeah, no, I don't want to raid a gaming channel if at all possible from a reading night. I want to keep the same vibe. Yeah, just go there. Yeah, you see her too, right? She's our reliable one. All right, awesome. Here we go.